Okay, I'm calling to order this special meeting and workshop of the City of Bandera Economic Development Corporation at City Hall, 511 Main Street, Bandera, Texas, Thursday, January 13th, 2022 at 6 p.m. If everybody will rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All board members are present with the exception of Alan Atterbury, who called me earlier to let me know he would not make it. We have our two new board members
Welcome.
here who were appointed by City Council and swore in already. If y'all would just introduce yourselves really quick.
I'm Kay Reese.
And I'm Lindsay Barnett.
Perfect. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? No? Okay. Agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on the following items. 4A, purchasing a new Connex box to replace the current one for the storage of Christmas lights and decorations.
I asked for this to be put on because our current Connex is leaking badly. And there's mold all in the Connex, and I'm afraid it's going to ruin a bunch of the lights and decorations that are in there. And I believe,
Okay.
didn't you get some prices?
I did. I called the gentleman at Hill Country Mobile Storage. For a used 20-foot Connex is $3,200, and a used 40-foot Connex is between $5,600 and $6,400, depending on the condition that it's in. And he knows where our lot is, and he believes that what we currently have are 20-footers.
They are.
Okay, so yeah, the price from him on that, and that's delivered to the lot where the other Connexes are, is $3,200 for a 20-footer. Laura?
I'd like to make a motion that we purchase a 20-foot Connex for the $3,200.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Delivery included.
Okay. We got a second?
Is that a second?
Yeah, a
You
second.
second? Any discussion?
For delivery included.
I have not seen it, so this is just purely without eyes, but there's no way of repairing it, cleaning it, anything like that.
There is, but it is
Just
so
this price?
full. My thought was that we purchase a new one that's already clean. There's really nice shelving in the one that we have that we can take and put in the other one. It's in 8-foot sections. We basically are 2x4s and ripped a sheet of plywood and then bolted them to the side. But the current one, there's nowhere to put everything once you pull it out to clean it out. That's what I see is.
It's a multi-day job. And
So you
once
have
we,
nowhere to store it once you've removed it all from the,
Right.
okay, and then do we have any intentions for the Connex boxes that we currently have once we've purchased another one and moved all the stuff into that one?
so my thought was that once everything's moved into the other one, we clean that one out, we reseal it, recaulk the inside, and then we can split what's in there, because right now you can't get to anything that's in the back without pulling everything out and just kind of organize, have a little bit more room. So if somebody comes and wants to use something, they don't have to empty out the entire Connex if what they want to use is in the very
Gotcha,
back
so we'll
of it.
utilize the previous and the new one as well, more than likely.
Or we can turn around and try to sell that one, the old one, back to a place.
Gotcha.
We can do
The bigger issue is
whatever
we
the
need
board
more
decides.
space than what we have, really.
We
Like even
really
if we
could-
cleaned it all out and found a temporary solution, we still need more space.
I mean, it is packed when it is full. I mean, you literally, the first time I went out there, I just opened the door and was like, oh, just shut it. I mean, it was that bad. Now, Jack did take everything they used this year, and he has temporarily stored it. They've done an inventory and everything on it. He's got it in temporary storage to see what would, until we could, because he hated to put that in there and then pull it out, because we're also trying to find volunteers from the community action group through maybe the 4-H or some other organizations to do an inventory of everything that's in there, so that next year, people didn't know what to ask for this year.
Right.
Because nobody knows what's in there, quite honestly. And if we don't get a handle on it now, we're probably never gonna. So my thought is as we're moving into the new one, let's inventory, take pictures and get rid of, the stuff that needs to go and,
Gotcha. And you said what 2 sizes did you get quotes on?
20 and 40 foot.
Okay, and you said what we have now is the 20 and the 40. Okay, what's the 20 again? I'm sorry.
3,200.
And the 40?
Between 56 and 6,400, depending on condition.
Okay,
the biggest thing we need is one that doesn't leak.
gotcha.
When Jack went out to get some of the tubs when they were taking down the decorations this past weekend, he actually poured water out of a number of them.
Gotcha.
So it's gotten bad, and it smells to high oven and mold.
Are the Connex boxes the best and only solution for the storage?
I'm always up for other solutions.
If you've got something better,
Yeah.
I think part of it is also location. It's out there off of Austin Street.
And accessibility. If we were to pay monthly for a storage unit, if people want to go out, having constantly rotating that code and
Yeah.
Right.
people that have access out there, and although not as feasible as where they're at now with accessibility. But I'm up to other storage solutions that are preferably in the same location as where the Connex is.
Is that free? Is that free?
The lot,
Yeah.
The city owns
we're-
it.
Okay, so we don't pay anything for that then. Well,
Right.
that's mighty nice.
yeah, there's no reoccurring bill.
Yeah, that's huge.
Alright, well then,
You're making us think, that's good.
I make a motion to purchase the 40-foot Connex box.
That motion's already been made and
So I
seconded.
second,
We're
so
in,
can
We need to vote.
we're in
vote.
discussion. So,
Okay, so can we?
any
oh,
other
I'm
discussion?
done with discussion.
Okay. All in favor of purchasing a 20-foot Connex box for the
20-foot?
Yeah,
20
that was
foot. for the price of
Mine was for the 40.
yeah.
But
So-
we, the
Oh,
motion was.
I understand what's happening, gotcha.
All right. All in favor of purchasing a 20-foot Connex box for the amount of $3,200?
Home with the same size.
All right. Opposed? Okay. All right. One opposed, so the motion passes. All right. So we will get with him, get it, and get it delivered out there.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank y'all, everyone. That solves a big problem.
They were talking about the 40 the whole time.
Move to
I know
item
we
number
talked about
5,
both, but I
workshop.
wanted the 40 just because if we're
So
gonna
at
do
this
it.
time, we will move into the workshop, and 5A is presentation by the EDC attorney on the board's abilities and ethics.
Okay,
You have the floor, sir.
all right. I'm happy to be here. My name's Monty Akers. I'm an attorney with the firm of Messerfort Darnell. With me is Doug Montgomery, who is also an attorney with this firm. And I'll go ahead and tell you the big news, which is Doug's gonna be taking over for me. I am semi-retired, which means that I'm still doing a little work, and you're still able to call on me or email me, whatever, if you want to do that. But then I'll turn around and make Doug do the heavy lifting. Okay, we're here to talk about economic development corporations, which are a rather unique creature. And in order to tell you about them, because I love history, let me take you back in time for 2 or 3 minutes and discuss the history. Particularly, let's go back to 1876, the year the St. Stanislaus Church was constructed here in Bandera, the year Custer was massacred, the year my grandmother was born, and the year the current Texas Constitution was adopted. Well, what was the cutting edge technology in 1876? Anybody want to guess? Railroads. And everybody wanted one. It's better than 5G. So as a result, a lot of cities and counties had offered all sorts of incentives to railroad companies to come. And most of those incentives were tax-based, meaning that when the railroad didn't come, as it didn't do in many, many cities and counties, the citizens were still stuck with the tax bill. So the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, decided we're not going to let that happen again. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen again, and we're going to prohibit the spending of public money to benefit individuals, associations, and corporations across the board. No mas. We're not going to allow it, and we're going to prohibit future legislatures from enacting a law that allows it. And that's Article 3, Section 52 of the Texas Constitution, and it's still good law. It's the underpinning for every expenditure by every city, because it means that you have to accomplish a public purpose anytime you spend public money. Well, here's this Bandera EDC. You've got all this money from sales tax, looks like public money, and you're giving it away. Or you're at least making deals with individuals, corporations, and associations. What's up with that? Well, it didn't take Texans too very long, about 25 years, to figure out that Article 3, Section 52 was unnecessarily restrictive. And so the legislature, rather than take a chance of trying to amend the Constitution by public vote and not succeeding, decided to find new ways around the prohibition. Well, legislature's been doing that forever, and they've been doing it with economic development at least since 1909. And to cut to the chase, in 1987, the Constitution was finally amended, not to repeal Article 3, Section 52, but to basically find that economic development is a public purpose. So as you've heard it said, the business of Texas is business. It's true. It's constitutional. Well, so we created these economic development corporations. And there's another aspect to economic development law, which is Chapter 380, which is when a city council offers some sort of financial incentive. You don't need to worry about those. So, economic development corporations got created in 1979, and it was off to a rough start. It wasn't until 1987, when the Constitution was amended, that they were clearly legal and above board, which they are, but they're also an odd creature. They're not a governmental subdivision. They're not a political subdivision. They're basically a non-profit corporation controlled by non-profit corporation laws, which we as attorneys have to look into, gosh, once or twice every 10 or 15 years. I mean, seriously, we don't have to deal with non-profit corporation laws very often, but occasionally. And that's what you are, as a non-profit corporation. But the legislature has made you subject to various laws that affect cities, particularly the Open Meetings Act, as well as the Public Information Act, sometimes called the Open Records Act. But guess what? You're not subject to procurement laws. You may have thought you were, and you may have been going out for bids, and if so, that's fine, no problem, not at all, but you don't have to. If you have an expenditure in excess of $50,000, whereas the city council has to either go out for bids or request for proposals, you don't have to do that. You can, but you don't have to. Another oddity is that you are not subject to Chapter 171 of the Local Government Code, which is the chapter that controls conflicts of interest. We're going to talk about ethics a little more later, and if anybody has ever said you've got a conflict of interest, you've got to fill out an affidavit, and file it with the city, and then abstain from participating in whatever the matter is, that's fine, not a problem. You just didn't have to do it under Chapter 171. So, what is, well, a little more on the history. The Act got up and really got going in '87, and that's up to then there was only a Type 4A or a type of economic development corporation addressed in Section 4A of the Act. In '87 they created 4Bs. Those are now called Type A and Type B, but you'll still hear some folks refer to them as 4A and 4B, and again, that's fine, no harm done. But properly they're Type A and Type B, and you're a Type B, which is the more popular and the more common type of economic development corporation. And you've got more flexibility in most cases, but you've also got a few more obligations and constraints that Type A's don't have. The Bandera Economic Development Corporation was created in 1995 by election of the people, and there was a ballot proposition on creating the, well, actually on adopting the sales tax, the half-cent sales tax. That ballot language continues to be important. Why? Because that's the point at which the voters approved invoking this tax, or imposing this tax, and at least in theory, you can only do it for what was approved in the ballot. Well, here's the ballot language. Adoption of sales tax, blah, 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 with the proceeds thereof to be used and applied to the purposes authorized by the Act. Hey, that should be all we need, right? I hope so. But then it goes on to say, including but not limited to use exclusively for water, sewer, drainage, and street improvements and maintenance and operating costs associated with such projects. Well, that's a little bit bothersome, especially that word exclusively, but it also says including but not limited to, so we're okay, right? I think so. I really honestly believe, otherwise I would have told you years ago that you needed another election, or that's the ramification for not having adequate ballot language, is you've got a project that you're not authorized to fund or provide incentives for. And down the road, if you get a project that you're a little worried about, look into that ballot language question. Get Doug to do some more heavy lifting. And if it's the project that's going to save Bandera, and you really want to do it, you may want to call another election with different ballot language. But I'm really just telling you that as interesting or semi-interesting information. Because I believe that you and various other cities that have whatever the purposes are authorized by the Act in their ballot language are thriving and not being challenged. Well, not being challenged is a good thing. For some reason, people who get free money, or feel like they're getting free money, or at least money that they feel like they've earned, don't tend to sue the entity that gave them the money. Praise the Lord. You're more likely to get bogged down in politics. You'll fund a project that isn't popular with everybody, or you'll fund a project that isn't popular with the city council, and it degenerates into something else. Or the other most likely thing to happen to you from a legal perspective is that the company, the business enterprise that you funded, fails to live up to its obligations and does not do what it said it would do, and so you decide, let's get our money back. let's implement the clawbacks that are in our performance agreement and get our money back. Well, another oddity in life is that companies that don't fulfill their obligations and go belly up don't always have money to return to who wants it or who thinks they're entitled to it. So quite frankly, don't, even though you're gonna do performance agreements that have clawbacks, and even though those clawbacks will be significant, down to personal guarantees and liens on property, my experience is that most times when a project falls through, the EDC has a lot of trouble getting its money back. That doesn't mean you're gonna be popular with citizens. Citizens don't know that, hey, most of this money is sales tax money from non-Bandera residents. It's these tourists that come in to spend all this sales tax money that becomes our public money. Citizens of Bandera aren't gonna think of it that way. They're gonna think, these fools are giving away my tax money. And they're gonna be upset about it. I've been involved with one EDC that did wind up going to court when it got into a squabble. I've been involved with a couple that had deals that went bad. But that's in a 25, 30-year time period. So it's not real common. Well, that's both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is not too many challenges. The curse is we don't get as much authority on the meaning of EDC law as you do in every other aspect of the law. You may not realize it, but lawyers depend on precedent. And when they've got a fact situation, they look for a similar fact situation and what the courts did then, or what the Attorney General opined, and we've got Attorney General opinions. But those various questions that are still hazy, or that you'll get a different answer on from different attorneys. Well, most of them, myself included, usually advise what is the most conservative approach, the approach that's most likely to keep you out of trouble. Do we have to have a hearing for this project? Well, no, I don't think you do, but let's do anyway, just to be safe. So, let's talk about what happened when the legislature got upset at cities and their EDCs. That was in 2002. And certain cities or individuals had been misusing economic development fund funds. I remember one mayor campaigned on the promise of fixing all the streets with EDC money, and or another of hiring an adequate police force with EDC money. Here's all this money sitting here, we need to use it. And he thought he was doing the right thing. Well, the legislature, particularly Senator Ratliff, who was a major supporter of cities, and this was back in the good old days when the legislature didn't hate us cities, Senator Ratliff led the charge to amend the Economic Development Act to essentially punish the cities that were doing it wrong. And it didn't last too long. They came back in the next session and repealed some of the more draconian aspects of the 2003 changes, but they left some of them in place. And that experience should serve as an example of what you don't want to do. If Bandera gets in the news because the EDC money was improperly spent, you may never get sued, you may never get anything else that happens, but your local legislature may decide, here's an issue I can make important or file a bill about in the next session. So we don't want that to happen. Now, in the 2003 legislation, one of the major things that was accomplished was focusing on primary jobs. That is supposed to be the primary purpose of an EDC, bringing jobs to the city. So that the norm for most projects is it's gonna create primary jobs. And primary jobs are defined in the statute, and I think they're discussed in my paper. I'm not gonna go into detail, but basically it's a preferably full-time job that meets the criteria. And you're gonna have a performance agreement that says this company's gonna create 20 primary jobs in 5 years, or whatever it is. But that's not the rule for all projects. Parks and Recreation, city parks and recreation are a purpose, and you can spend money essentially giving money to the city. But it's for an authorized purpose, and that's allowed, and there's no primary jobs associated. Nor is there a performance agreement associated with it. We'll talk about what a performance agreement is and what its elements are and why you need one in a few minutes. But if your arrangement is with the city of Bandera, for example, or something else that is not a business enterprise, you don't have to have a performance agreement. We can talk about what you should have, but it doesn't have to be a formal performance agreement. So what is a performance agreement? Well, the answer to that is in my paper and in, I believe it's section 501, 07, no, I'm sorry. Somewhere, where is performance agreements? 501, 158. It's on page 6 of the paper. A performance agreement is a contract, obviously, and the statutory language is there on chapter 6, on page 6. And it requires a minimum of 3 things, and that is the schedule of jobs to be created, the capital investment to be made, and the clawbacks, the means by which the EDC will get repayment if the performance requirements are not met. So those 3 are the minimum. Now, as a practical matter, capital investment is rarely a big deal. I mean, it's going to be in the agreement, but if you've decided to do it, you're probably not going to base it on how much the capital investment is or is not. And if you have a project that's outside the scope of the primary job requirement, well, you can just say something like no primary jobs will be created. And then you'll have your clawbacks. And those usually are obligations that require the business entity to repay if it doesn't live up to the performance agreements. And I have had a few instances where that has happened and the EDC has gotten its money back. But more commonly, the performance agreement gets repealed and the 2 parties go their separate ways. So I assume you've had performance agreements, right? And I should stop and say that this is not intended to be just a lecture. So if you've got a question, hold your hand up and let's talk about it. Because I really want to address what's important to Bandera EDC rather than what's important to Doug and Monty. So, let me see, where was I in my outline? I actually have an outline here someplace. Okay. So what's a typical chain of events to get you to a project? Well, usually the EDC has a primary EDC person, often called an executive director, but not necessarily. And it could be the president of the EDC, sometimes called chairman. In any event, what happens most typically is that person is contacted by a business enterprise saying, I'm interested in starting a such and such business in Bandera, or I'm interested in expanding my existing business in Bandera, and it doesn't have to be in Bandera, it could be outside city limits, but most of you are going to be in Bandera, what can the EDC offer me? Well, whoever that person is, we'll call him the executive director, gets all the information, negotiates a deal, and then brings to the board a proposal or a draft performance agreement. And y'all vote that project up or down. If you do decide to enter into that performance agreement, then you're going to have to issue notice, you're going to have a hearing, and you're going to have to wait 60 days from the date the notice is published until you actually expend any of those funds that are promised. Why 60 days and what's going to happen in 60 days? Well, that 60-day period is to allow the good citizens of Bandera to petition for an election about this particular project. Rarely happens, but it can. Quite frankly, most EDCs have public hearing, issue notice and have public hearings, and nobody shows up. But that's not always the case, and sometimes they get hot and bothered and quite controversial. Of course, I know controversy doesn't happen in Bandera hardly ever, but it does happen in some cities. So you're telling me that we issue notice, does it have to be published in the paper? Should be. That's one of those unanswered questions, and I've seen EDCs that think, well, it's on an agenda, that ought to be good enough. Don't do that. Put it in the paper. Publish the notice, make a copy of that published notice, and count 60 days from the date of that notice. Well, the notice is going to say there's a hearing, right? You probably. But you don't count the 60 days from the date of the hearing. In fact, you can even have the hearing before you issue the notice. Never seen it happen, but oddly enough, the statute doesn't say notice, hearing, 60 days, spend money. It just says you gotta have notice, you gotta have a hearing, you gotta have 60 days from the notice, and then you can spend the money. But I'm probably telling you things that'll confuse you more than help you, because what you should do is issue the notice saying there's going to be a public hearing on such and such a date, at such and such a time, in such and such a place, and then you wait 60 days from that notice period before you actually spend the money. Now then, again, are there no questions popping up? I was planning on questions. Otherwise, you may have to go home early. Let's talk about promotional expenses. How much, yes, ma'am?
How can you strengthen the performance,
Agreements.
yes, to work in our favor,
Well,
to help us, to help?
well, a personal guarantee whereby the president of the business enterprise pledges his personal funds and agrees to, he's more likely to have something you can get a judgment against than a company that's gone belly up. If real estate is involved, as it often is, you can require that they give you a lien so that you can foreclose on the real estate. Those are two very good and effective methods that are not popular with business enterprises. You can certainly insist on them, but don't be surprised if the company says no. In most cases, it's a contractual obligation to repay within 30 days following usually breach and cure. Usually the performance agreements say in the event of breach of, in the event of the failure of the business enterprise to fulfill such and such obligations as bringing the number of primary jobs that are promised, then the city will notify the business in writing, give them X number of days, 30 or whatever, to cure the problem. And if it isn't cured, then you're going to notify them that they must repay you. And then maybe they will, maybe they won't. But anyway, that's a common question and concern, and one of the places where this act was created for the purpose of giving money away to attract business, rather than to keep cities and EDCs whole. Citizens don't understand that. If you find a project that goes belly up, they'll blame you for it, and even though you may have done everything you can, just when that unhappy situation arises, talk bad about the lawyer. But don't actually blame him, because he probably did all he could to keep the project alive. Promotional expenses. Who's most familiar with the BEDC's finances or budget? Anybody in the room? Nobody? Okay, that's fine. The reason I ask is to find out how you handle promotional expenses.
10%.
And what is a promotional expense?
Advertising,
Could be.
Flyers.
Could be a plaster hippo. That's the Texas Attorney General opinion that is most well known in regard to this question, which is the hippo opinion. When the EDC bought small statues of hippos, and placed them around town, and somebody said that can't be a valid economic development expense. And the Attorney General basically said, well, but it was treated as a promotional expense. And the basic rule on a promotional expense is that if a majority of this board thinks that a particular expenditure will promote the interests of the city, the citizens, the public, it's probably a bona fide promotional expense. Obviously, if you decide to pave every board member's driveways, the law's going to see through that. But if it's a bona fide belief and vote by a majority of you that it is a valid promotional expense, great. And as your president mentioned, 10% is the key. You can spend up to 10% of your revenues on promotional expenses, and guess what? You don't need a performance agreement. You don't need clawbacks. You can spend them for things that don't look all that much like promotional expenses if the vote majority has approved it. And if you're wrong, the worst case scenario is in the unlikely event that somebody filed suit and was able to prove up that it wasn't a promotional expense, the worst case scenario is you would probably have to rearrange your budget numbers, and whatever you treated as promotional would come out of your general fund, your EDC fund. So it's 10% of what we took in this last year, right? No. It's okay. Well, it's 10% of whatever we have right now, right? No. No. Oddly enough, the language for promotional expenses refers to. Refers to your. Why is it hiding from me? Corporate revenues. That's the key language. Corporate revenue. And that's not a well-defined term, and that's another example of unclarity in the law, lack of clarity. But what it's commonly interpreted to mean is all the revenue we've ever had, going all the way back in Bandera's case to 1995, adding that all up, and then adding up all the times, all that you spent on promotional expenses to see if there's anything left over. And there probably will be. But that's a umbrella, a parachute that cities have sometimes, or EDCs have sometimes been able to take advantage of. By how that 10% is calculated. Although, I've never seen anybody go back to when they were created and add it all up. A well-run EDC will calculate what its normal corporate revenues are and say, okay, we're not gonna spend more than 10% of that for promotional purposes. But there are some EDCs that are totally unaware of that promotional expense category, and they never use it, which is something they're missing out on. There's another very handy thing that EDCs like Bandera's have and can take advantage of. There are, I mentioned that when the legislature changed the law in 2003, it imposed some mandates and didn't take them all away. Well, some of those that they didn't take away affect EDCs in cities of less than 20,000, such as y'all. It does it in three ways. The 20,000 population rule applies in three ways. The first is that you can, but do not have to, allow non-residents of Bandera to be board members. There's a limitation on how far out of town they have to live. I think it's within 10 miles of town, and then there's a rule for cities that are in more than one county. But anyway, that's the first one, which is not a hot issue very often. The other one is, or another one, is that for a city, an EDC in a city of less than 20,000 that enters into a project that's going to involve the expenditure of $10,000 or more, has to get the city council's blessing of that project by resolution that is read separately on 2 occasions. What does that mean? Well, it may have, in the mind of the drafter, it may have meant 2 different meetings, but a lot of EDCs do it with just 2 separate agenda items. Now, it's on the city council's agenda. What does that mean? Are you guys, are any of you city council members? You're not, are you?
Not now.
Not now, but you have in the past, and you're allowed to have council members on the EDC. And EDCs and city councils are expected to work hand in glove. I mean, whatever you all think is good for the city ought to obviously be something that the council thinks is good for the city. But guess what? That doesn't always happen either. And let me tell you, you don't want to pick a fight with your city council. You may disagree with them, you may have some friendly conversations about who's right and who's wrong, but they've got the power. There is a statute that says that all programs and expenditures of the EDCs will be approved by the governing body. I'm not sure what will be approved means. It sounds like kind of a prophecy, but it's interpreted to mean that every expenditure that you make, including that tank that you approved, has to be approved by the city council. Well, does that mean you're going to have to get that item on the agenda for city council approval? You can if you want to. More likely, and I don't know how Bandera does it, more likely though, your budget process is where certain expenditures get approved. Typically, an EDC that's well-run, in my opinion, will include all of its current projects in its annual budget that the city council then approves. And it's only when you've got a brand new type of project that wasn't budgeted that you need to take it back to the city council and get their approval. But it's very important that you get their approval one way or the other. And the other way, besides all their approval ability, city council has the ability to remove any or all of you at any time for any reason or no reason at all. So be nice to your council members, even though it's hard. Again, let me invite questions.
So you gave two, did you say there were 3 items?
The residency of the board member,
Uh-huh,
the 3 reading requirement,
okay.
and, glad you asked,
10,000.
because I hadn't told you about the third one, and it's the most important one of all. There is a innocuous sounding provision in chapter 505 of the local government code, which, I'm having trouble finding again. Well,
Is there any part?
no, it's a provision that says a project includes one that the board of directors finds will, the word's not enhance, and that's why I was looking for the exact language. But
Page
which
4,
will- Mhm.
page
Page
4, number 2, what is the project?
Well, I'm getting close, but that wouldn't be exact. It basically allows an EDC, a majority of the members of a board of directors of a type B EDC located in a city of 20,000 or less to decide that a project that enhances, improves business development is a bona fide project. Now, that may not sound all that exciting, but that's pretty significant. You don't have to have primary jobs. A lot of things that you would normally expect your EDC to fund that may not need to be there if a majority of you think that it enhances, enlarges, or expands business development in the city. And I worry about that particular provision because I don't think the legislature realized what they were saying when they enacted it. And I think that some legislators, if they discovered that there were EDCs out approving projects that didn't create primary jobs, didn't fund parks and recreation, would object to your doing that. But the law is clear that you have that authority. And keep that in your hip pocket and use it when you need to.
Yes.
Yes, sir?
Jerry Russ. I'm city council member, but I'm here as a citizen. Doesn't that have to fall under, true question, fall under the second type of project as defined?
The
To
second-
be used for something other than, that's not going to create primary jobs?
Well, no, it doesn't. I mean, that's the beauty of the broadness of the language, and I don't want to mislead you. I don't want to give you the impression that there are EDCs out creating projects willy-nilly that were not intended. But it is an exception to the primary job creation rule, and it doesn't have any other bells and whistles like parks, recreation, water, sewer, utilities, streets. It's a project, so that, in theory at least, an existing business could come in, apply for, and get some economic development incentives. Most EDCs say, no, we don't give money to anybody but new businesses. We don't give money to any business, to any project that's already started. It has to be one that starts after we agree, after we enter into our performance agreement. But you'll find some cities that have big programs, BIG, business improvement grants. And they're usually fairly modest, maybe $5,000 max. But they're available to existing businesses for specified purposes, such as refurbishing signs that are getting ugly, or some other local improvement. I mean, obviously you use good common sense and don't throw away the money foolishly, but it could be, a new plate glass window for the Old Spanish Trail restaurant, in theory. Okay, what now? Come on now, what have y'all not been certain of in regard to your EDC activities in the past? Just one.
Would you talk about some of the types of projects? I remember one of the TML seminars, I think there was like 11 different categories of projects.
Yeah, and if you look on page
And you may have it in your handout and I missed
4 and
it.
5, there's an exhaustive list, and this is a list that comes out of chapter 501 of the local
Okay.
government code. By the way, you probably already know this, but chapter 501 and chapter 505 of the local government code are the two chapters of the law that wherein most of the applicable law applies to y'all. Chapter 501 applies to both type A and type B cities, although, or EDCs, although it was originally enacted before a type B was created. Type B cities are uniquely governed by chapter 505. Everything in chapter 505 is a type B. This list on pages 4 and 5, again, these come out of the statute. All of your projects should fit into one of those categories, and they're pretty broad. And they're tied to, was it NCIS?
NAICS codes.
There you go. I'll be teaching this course. But I've never seen a situation where a project was challenged by citizens or anybody because they didn't think it was the right kind of primary job. And most times, if you're getting somebody employed, it's gonna meet the criteria. Well,
Land uses. When EDC owns land and we're looking, we've got people, and this is one of the next items for the workshop, when we've got people that bring proposals to purchase the land from us, what are restrictions we have as an EDC when selling that? What in the spirit of how the EDCs were formed,
well,
what are we looking at?
is your question tied to,
Are we required to sell land at current market value to somebody if we see what they're doing as an positive economic impact on the community?
you are not required to get fair market value. Where the sale of land, the lack of clarity, at least in my mind, about the sale of land is whether or not you have to treat it as a project or not. I mean, if you're going to sell a land to the ABC company, Certainly, if you're doing so at a bargain price, you're gonna sell it to them for $1,000 an acre, and it's normally going for whatever it is, 10,000 an acre. Then obviously you're granting them a financial incentive, and all the rules apply as far as a performance agreement and approval by the city council. On the other hand, if you've got a lot or a tract that you want to sell for the revenue, and it's not tied to a particular project, I don't think that's really a project that requires a performance agreement. To be safe, you might do it anyway. But I think you can just enter into a contract of sell it, of course, you get city council approval. And I know y'all have had some questions about potential conflicts of interest in regard to what boards some of you may be serving on, and that's always more of a challenge in a town the size of Bandera. But you know, as far as what are the guidelines, you know, Joe Blow walks in and says, hey, you all own Blackacre, I want to buy it, I'm willing to give you $100,000, and you like that, well, you bring it to the board, you discuss it. If anybody does have a conflict of interest, they should abstain from participating. The Chapter 171 rule about filing an affidavit doesn't apply, but you still need to abstain or not participate. But then, you know, you would enter into a contract of sale, and you would get the city council to approve that contract of sale, and then you'd sell it. Fairly straightforward. Not most cities or most EDCs that have land, in my experience, have it for the purpose of attracting businesses. They have an industrial park, such as the Marble Falls Business and Technology, or the City of Lockhart's Industrial Park. It's a tract of land that the EDC bought and now is selling at a reduced price compared to what you're paying elsewhere, to attract businesses, and it works marvelously in most cases. What else about land sales? I didn't, yes ma'am.
What if we own property and we want to say, for instance, put, we own a lot and we want to put food trucks on it? Is that something the EDC can do to get revenue?
Well, you say put food trucks on it.
Can we lease that land or rent out?
Yes, rent out.
Yes, you may lease that land. You want to avoid becoming a business entity yourself. You're not allowed to do that.
Okay.
So it can't be your food trucks. But you could have a tract of land that is made available for lease or sale for even food trucks. I mean,
So you could have multiple food trucks?
You could, yes. I mean, most EDCs save that land for that dream project that's gonna save everybody, but in theory, yeah, you can do it. What else? Yes, ma'am.
What are the stipulations on getting land or purchasing land? Do we need to have a project in mind, or can we purchase just for the sole sake of holding valuable land?
Well, the latter answer is yes, in the sense that that's what Marble Falls and Lockhart did. They went out and found a large tract of land that they thought was suitable, and City Council approved their buying it. They bought it, surveyed it, got it subdivided into smaller tracts, and now they peddle those tracts off as businesses come. And you know, not only do you attract the businesses, but you get them all, or similar businesses often in one location, and it works pretty well.
Okay. Are there any projects or any entities that we can't work with or can't?
Well,
offer the land to or offer promotional, is there anyone we can't deal with, I guess?
well, the answer to that is yes, there are some that you're not allowed to deal with, but the reasons are outside of the normal chapter 501, chapter 505 rules. It's like, what's the prohibition against doing business with any company that is critical of Israel? I mean, there's a state law that prohibits you in certain instances, and and there's obviously you can't get involved in some sort of illegal business. You can't agree to start a casino on your EDC land. But most the things that you're prohibited from dealing with are going to be uncommon. You're not going to get popped because you're allowed a barber shop. Even though barber shops aren't very often subject to projects. What else? Yes, ma'am.
What about purchasing land for Parkland? Are there any stipulations?
That's a place where the law encourages it. The city of Rollingwood has an EDC, and its only purpose, as far as I can tell, is to fund its parks. Parks and recreational facilities are a recognized project that you're allowed to fund. And I've represented cities where the EDC and the city council did work hand in hand, and I've worked for ones where they were very critical of each other. It's not unusual at all to find an EDC that operates and has operated independently for years, and the city council just let them do it. And then the city council, some new mayor or whatever, thinks he's got authority to exercise on the EDC, and he does, the city council does, but it's news to the EDC, and they discover that to their detriment.
So should the EDCs maintain the land in their name then?
Well, in most cases, that's not what happens. In most cases, you buy the land and you give it to the city, you dedicate it to the city for park purposes. Now, anytime a city has land that is used for recreational and park purposes, the law makes it hard for the city to ever change that use. You have to have an election of the people to allow you to stop using that as a park. So that's a big step for a tract of land that may have more than just park purpose potential.
Can we fund positions within the park, or like someone to clean up the park or maintenance? Is that anything that can come from our budget?
Well, it shouldn't. I mean, it's not at all unusual for a city employee who does EDC work, such as the executive director, to have part of his salary paid by EDC and part of his salary paid by the city. That's not at all unusual. But I've never seen a circumstance, and I think it would be prohibited for you to just be expected to fund the city employees who work in the parks.
Okay.
Okay?
And once we give, say we do give land to the city, I guess that wouldn't matter if we went ahead and still did things for the city, like put in infrastructure or help them in any way, even though it's not in our name, that's still easily allowed.
No, I mean, it's very common for EDCs to fund infrastructure projects in the city. Another city that we represent just routinely sends information to the EDC. We would like to do X, Y, Z in regard to parks, recreation, or infrastructure in particular. And we want you to give us $200,000. Well, it's still up to the board to do it, but in some cities, the city councils have their way more than in others. So,
Right.
if that
Yeah,
answers
that
your
answers
question.
it, thank you.
What else? Come on, there's something bothering you. Yeah, there you are.
Can you go over a little bit more detail on what infrastructure projects are allowed to be funded?
Streets utilities is what is most common. I mean, it could be more than that. It could be a new city hall. But in most cases, a city is needing to extend its sewer or water mains to a particular tract of properties. And that's the kind of funding that they're seeking.
Is there any limitations, like how much of, say, a street needs to be business to qualify, or?
Well, you're not allowed to spend money on something that's just gonna serve residential.
Understand.
It most definitely must benefit the business community or business enterprises. The fact that it also benefits residential doesn't make it illegal, but you cannot do one that is, you know, just a residential street.
Doesn't have any business. So one business on a street, say a 3-mile stretch, which we don't even have here in this town, but say a 1-mile stretch, would that still qualify?
Well,
I mean, is there anything that specifically states
No,
there
there's-
must be a certain percentage?
no, there's an attorney, at least one attorney general's opinion that says it must benefit business, or I don't remember what the language is, business or industry or manufacturing. It cannot just benefit residential, but it doesn't get down to that criteria. That's where the determinations by majority of the board and majority of the council control. Anything else?
I have one more. If, say we have land and a huge need in Bandera is housing for workers. So if we wanted to take on a project, say providing residential housing for, you know, underserved workers, or would that be a project in our scope, or is that considered residential?
There are affordable housing projects that are specifically allowed under the statutes. I mean,
Okay.
it's $505-153. Projects related to affordable housing. For the purposes of this chapter, projects includes land, building, equipment, facilities, and improvements found by the board of directors to be required or suitable for the promotion of development and expansion of affordable housing as described by a particular federal law. So, yeah, there are some EDCs that have made affordable housing a top priority in their particular city. So that is something you can explore. And that's a good example of my ballot language concern, because that affordable housing provision wasn't in the law in 1995. So if I'm an attorney who's been hired to kill that particular project, that affordable housing project, that would be my argument. Voters never approved it. They only approved what was in the law in 1995. And there's gonna be some other types of projects that fall in that category. Mercifully, the legislature doesn't amend the Economic Development Act very often. It's more often that we'll get an attorney general's opinion that clarifies or muddies the water on some particular legal issue. That's me.
What about bringing in industries such as trade schools,
Well, then-
healthcare? That's
You can, job training classes are allowed, career centers are allowed, but educational buildings or, I guess my best example is Schulenburg. Schulenburg created an economic development corporation for the purpose of funding Blinn College. Shortly thereafter, or a few years thereafter, probably in the 2003 session, the legislature took Blinn College type projects off the table. So that now, if Blinn College wanted to come to Bandera, y'all shouldn't give them any money to do that. But Schulenburg did it while it was still allowed. They're still providing some funding to them.
So a trade school would not,
Well, the trades, if you get notified by a trade school, then look at the provisions that are in the act and ask Doug to do some research on whether this particular type of trade school can be considered a career center or a job training, a source of job training.
okay.
And chances are it can be, but I can't tell you just willy-nilly.
Okay.
You know, and I think there would be a difference between y'all's funding a course to teach welding versus the building of a structure for the trade school to operate in. I think you can do the former, but not the latter.
Okay. That was initially when some of our property was purchased, was to bring in a trade school or a healthcare facility.
But that was to sell the land to them and
Right.
entice
Yeah,
them.
that's a little
Right.
different.
I mean, you know, you could have a performance agreement whereby the EDC agrees to sell the land at $1,000 an acre if they promise to build a trade school, and that one would need to be looked at real closely before we knew it was okay. But anyway, yes, ma'am.
So just to clarify, you said that is something that would be in our scope, is to maybe hire someone or have like classes provided to residents or to high school students or some sort of training. That would be something that we could pay for?
Well, I know of EDCs that do have relationships with the local school districts, or even, I think, junior colleges, whereby there is some funding provided for particular job training courses and sessions. So I think the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, and based off that too, how much can we support our local schools?
Well, it's not a question of how much, it's a question of whether you're supporting them for the right purposes.
Okay.
And, you know, if the Bandera ISD comes to you asking for money, that would surprise me. B, I'd caution you that that's not what EDCs generally do. But then, depending on what they wanted to do with the money, it might be possible. But as a general rule, an EDC is not in the business of supporting its local schools.
Right.
I mean, obviously, they schools benefit from things you do, but you're not out there going, yeah, Bandera.
Yeah, give you money, yeah. But as far as helping our local students and population receive job training or that kind of would fall under our development of the economy.
Yeah, if you want to help your students as opposed to the ISD,
I got you.
then it would be job training classes primarily.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jumping back earlier to when you were discussing eligibility or requirements for a board member, stating they can live in the county versus in the city. I didn't catch the one part, you said if within 10 miles
Let me be a little more
of the
specific.
city.
Where it's 10 miles is what I said.
Page 9.
What?
Page 9.
Page 9. Okay.
I'm missing a
page
missing
nine.
a
I am
page too.
Yeah.
Look on the back side.
It's not there. They're gone.
We're missing
8,
9
9,
and
and
10.
10 are all gone.
Yes.
Ah.
I'll leave my page 9 with you, but basically, if you're in a city of less than 20,000, the board members must be a resident of the city or resident of the county in which a major part of the city is located, or reside within 10 miles of the city's boundaries and in a county bordering the county in which most of the area is located.
And
It was almost
Yeah,
clear.
I guess if you were right on the line,
Yeah,
that's what they're getting at.
Yeah, and I-
So
it
if
should be
Pipe,
within-
if Pipe Creek was incorporated and it's within 10 miles of the Medina County line, then they had an EDC, then an EDC board member could live in Medina County as long as they were within 10 miles of the incorporated city of
yeah,
Pipe Creek.
I think so.
Okay, so the 10 miles
Wow.
just pertains to people outside of the county?
Outside,
Outside of the city.
outside the city.
It's
So,
got to be
We
within 10 miles of the city's boundaries.
So the
And,
the city of Bandera resides
Missing
completely
page.
in the county of
So
Bandera.
we need
So board members can be
8,
a
9, and
county
10.
member, period, without a
We
distance
need 8, 9,
restriction.
and 10.
now,
Is that correct?
8, 9, and 10?
Yes. So hold on a sec.
Well, that's odd.
so,
Are all of you missing it?
Yes.
yes,
Hold on.
Somebody's
Hold on.
fired.
Let's get this clarification really quick, and Keely, before you run off with that
Right.
page you just
Right.
that you took.
Here,
Thank you.
So, since Bandera resides completely in the county of Bandera and not within 10 miles of a county line, the members can be a county resident without that 10-mile restriction,
Ah,
correct?
That's what it
Must-
sounded like
That's
you said, so that's why I just
That's
wanted
true.
clarification.
they must reside within 10 miles. Okay, let's see, let me start. Be a resident of the county in which a major part of the city is located. Okay?
We
Doesn't
do
that take
right
care of
there.
all of your
Yeah.
situations? So that's
So that
that.
closes that. So
Yeah.
the 10 miles really is for more
They
for
can be,
outside.
they can be in Bandera County 30 miles away.
The
Okay.
10 miles
But
is
they
for
can't be in
an
Medina
EDC
County.
within 10 miles of another county.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, Lauren lives in Medina, which is 16 miles away.
Okay.
So that's what I'm asking.
Well, now, having said all that, look at your bylaws, because usually the bylaws
Our-
address
Our by-
qualifications for,
Our EDC bylaws,
yes, ma'am.
Well, so city
I
council
believe-
recently went to go back to Texas statute, and our bylaws have not been updated since that. But city council moved, we remember how many months ago? To make, because there was a problem finding qualified applicants to serve on the board.
maybe 6
They
months ago.
they removed the requirements, stipulations that the city had put on it to match what the state of Texas requirements for
Well, then
it.
it should match that
Yes,
same county 10 miles.
it's the same.
That's what it should be.
So county residents, all they gotta be for us.
Yeah, I mean, another city I represented wanted to put somebody on, but it had to amend its bylaws before it could do so.
Our EDC bylaws, I believe,
Yes.
do have a stipulation, but city
That's gotta
council
be up-
superseded. Yeah,
well,
we
that's
need to
gotta be
update
updated.
that.
No,
Yeah.
if your bylaws say all members have to be a city resident, you need to amend those bylaws.
Right.
Okay?
So that definitely needs to be done.
Well,
Or
That's one of the things that's on the list for the new year with all the changes that
gosh,
have
yes.
happened in the last year. Okay, any other questions?
What else do you want to talk about?
one last, well, maybe not last, but one question. Purchasing or selling to a board member?
Well, you're prohibited from entering into a contract. There's an Attorney General's opinion that says an EDC cannot contract with one of its own members. Now, having said that, if you've got a situation where the board member has a substantial interest in real estate and it's gonna be on the agenda in front of the council, my advice to him or her would be, don't participate at all. If you wanna file the affidavit to make people happy that says, identifies your substantial interest, great. You just don't have to. So, anytime you've got a board member that's interested in one of your ongoing projects, talk to Doug. And Doug will call me, and I'll call TML.
Okay. I had another question, but I forgot, sorry.
Okay, what,
Oh, I'm sorry. What is considered a conflict of interest? At what point do you have to make notice or state that you
well,
have
I'm gonna tell
conflict?
you what a conflict of interest is based on the statute that I've just been telling you doesn't apply to. Years ago, conflicts of interest were governed by very subjective standards. You know, the smell test, that ain't right, so it must be against the law. And the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, came in and implemented what is now Chapter 171 to impose objective standards to determine what is a conflict of interest. And it decided that you're gonna have a conflict of interest in two instances. One, when you've got a substantial interest in real estate that is being considered, and the other time when you've got a substantial interest in a business enterprise that's involved in business. Okay, well, what's my substantial interest? Well, the legislature put dollar signs to that. And a substantial interest, I used to know this by heart, I'm getting old. If you own 10% or more of the voting stock, or 10% or more than $15,000 of the fair market value of the business, or the funds you receive from the business constitute more than, is it 10% or more? Exceeds 10% of the person's gross income from last year. So, you've got to figure out, well, in 2021, I made $100,000, and this company's paying me a mere $9,999, so I'm okay.
So you have to have monetary value for it to be considered a conflict of interest.
Well,
If you're getting any monetary gain, or if you're
Well-
not getting monetary gain?
well, as I said, the conflict of interest laws used to be very subjective. You can still wind up being charged or being alleged that you have violated, you have a common law conflict of interest. And what that means is a conflict of interest that the courts have found to constitute a conflict. And that means you could go back to those old laws that preceded Chapter 171 and possibly find a situation where you've got a conflict of interest under old court determinations. So I'm not just trying to dodge your question, but these numbers, these dollar figures, and there's dollar figures for how much ownership of real estate you have too. Those are the most objective standards that we have. And it's simpler for a city council because they're clearly subject to Chapter 171. And y'all aren't, according to the Attorney General.
When in doubt, go the conservative route.
When in doubt, go the conservative route.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna use my own example. I serve on the board of Silver Sage. Silver Sage made a proposal to purchase some of the land that we own. I had abstained from voting. But I from what you're saying, I really didn't need to do so.
No, you did. But the statute that requires you to abstain and punishes you if you don't, doesn't apply.
Okay,
Under chapter 171, if you have the substantial interest in business or land and you don't file your affidavit, or even if you do, but you then participate, and it's not just voting, it's participating. So it's entering into the discussion. That is a criminal offense. And I wanted to say it's a type A misdemeanor. And the other concern, I'm not finding it. Yeah, Class A misdemeanor. Jail time possible for Class A's. Does it happen often? No.
so
But-
I get no money from being on the board. Actually, I probably pay them because I,
Well,
But your interest is in the interest of the board, right?
I'll put it this way, if you did participate in the sale of EDC land to Silver Sage, is it Silver Sage or Silver Spurs? Silver
Sage.
I wouldn't lose any sleep over it, because there's two or three theories, two or three arguments to say you didn't do anything wrong, but don't do it again. It's the sort of thing that, if nothing else, the newspapers love to pick up on it, and citizens love to pick up on
Be cautiously above board.
it. Please. And the one other thing that could happen is if somebody who wasn't supposed to cooperate, wasn't supposed to participate, did participate, and the matter would not have passed but for their vote, then that action that was taken is voidable. Trying to make sure it's voidable, not void. So anyway, it's voidable. You know, the difference between voidable and void is void means never happened. Voidable means it has to be challenged, and if not challenged within the statute limitations period, it's okay. Yes, ma'am.
I guess my other question to you might be on ethics. How, in wording, what, is there any words of what we can and cannot say?
What you can and cannot say,
Yeah,
Well-
in a meeting. Not, I guess if you, to someone in the
Words you cannot
audience
say.
or
Well-
something along.
well,
Promise did years ago.
the pesky First Amendment is going to protect you from most things that you say. But there's various ethical things that you can screw up on. Things that may or may not truly be ethics issues, such as nepotism.
Right.
And disclosures, there's requirements of disclosures of relationships that you had with businesses that have come before you. There's prohibitions on accepting gifts or anything that can be considered bribery. There's a whole list of penal code provisions, falsifying documents, misuse of city property, using city resources for political advertising. There's all sorts of things that are more or less ethics issues, but most people, when they think of ethics, think of conflicts of interest.
Okay. What about, you mentioned gifts. Somewhere in my back of my mind, I had a $25 rule.
It's more like a $50.
Okay. Inflation.
Well, no, it's been 50 for a while.
Okay, well,
Uh,
it's been there for a long time.
yeah, but well, you're not supposed to accept any item that's worth $50 or more. But you're also not supposed to accept cash in any amount.
Right.
Now, that enough on ethics? or
I
you
have,
wanna go
I have a
further?
question.
Yes, ma'am.
Say we have a land deal, and say there, we're trying to discuss the eligibility of the buyer. How much can we say about the buyer in open session, or is that a closed session issue as far as like their financial abilities to repay or something along those lines?
Well, I think just common sense should guide you. There's not a prohibition against talking about an applicant's financial situation. It's almost certain to be part of the process so that you'll wind up with some sort of public record that the citizens are entitled to get a copy of. But if you're in a situation where you can go into executive session, and that'll be most likely under 551, 187, 186, the economic development exception, that would be the proper place to discuss that.
Okay.
You're never, contrary to what some people believe, you're never mandated, or it's extremely rare that you're mandated to go into executive session. Even to talk about people and their performance and say things that would embarrass them. The law allows it in open session.
Okay. And is there a time when it specifically cannot be said in closed session?
I can't think of an example. Have you got one in mind?
No, just I guess going into the eligibility of a project, would some of those negotiations need to be, open for discussion, or can we do the particulars in closed session?
Well, let's say you're selling Blackacre and you've got two prospective buyers, and one of them's got a good reputation and one of them's got an unknown reputation or worse. You're not gonna get in trouble talking about that second person's reputation unless you defame their character, which is possible. Defamation of character, or libel if it's in writing, defamation of character if it's spoken, is an offense for which you can be sued if that person that you disparaged or defamed is not a public servant, and they suffer some injury. If you go into executive session and you say, I know this second applicant, he's a pedophile. I know he is. I know because I can spot pedophiles just by looking in their eyes. And everybody else goes, really? And then the news is out on the street, this guy's a pedophile. Well, that person is almost certainly going to suffer some injury as a result of that. But even if they were unable to prove up any bona fide injury, they would be able to recover if they would win the case if they sued you for defamation of character. They may only get $1 in damages, but that's where you have to be careful, not EDC law.
What if they were actually a legal?
Pedophile?
Yeah,
Well,
and, like convicted of
the
it, then it
truth
wouldn't be
is
defense.
a defense to
Right.
defamation of character.
So it is a defense or is not?
It is.
Okay.
It is. You can take a little bit of truth and go too far with it, but if they really were a convicted sex offender, the fact that you told the world, of course, they probably all you have to do is check on your internet to find out where they are.
You better make sure you're right, though.
Yeah, you better make
Yeah.
sure you're right.
Better, for sure, know the facts.
Yeah, As your attorney, I advise you to stay away from discussions of pedophilia.
Gladly.
What else you wanna talk about? Still,
Lauren?
I'm good, I'm done.
Ms. Ma'am?
Ran out of words.
We haven't gone out and looked for anybody to come bid on the Buck Creek property. We haven't put out any advertise or whatever the correct verbiage is. And we've had a party come forward and they want to buy it in there. I don't feel we have enough specifics. I thought this was the original intent of this was a workshop with them.
Portion B is the
Portion B.
workshop that you're,
Oh, is it here? They're here? They're not here.
no, that's
Okay, never
on,
mind. But, do we accept who just, we didn't have it for sale at the time, we didn't advertise, they came, you know, and we listened, and I didn't really hear any specifics that grabbed my ear. And I don't wanna insult them, but I feel like we're cutting our nose off to spite our face, whatever the phrase is, by not going out and trying to attract other customers.
Well, let me ask, how much land does the EDC own?
5.57 acres, isn't that correct?
that's
Well,
that
just
one-
on Buck
that's
Creek,
that
in this one project,
That's-
the only one that we have a.
4 separate properties, it looks like, and some of those
And
have multiple
how
lots.
Right.
and why did you acquire it?
That's what we're
Well,
trying to figure out.
Right, that's.
Initially, it was purchased with intent. First off, we were trying to encourage the county to combine their buildings and move over there along with the city to free up buildings on the main area. Are 3 things. The third thing was the intent of bringing in a trade school, and the third one was a healthcare facility.
Okay. Well, in other words, the land that the EDC owns were acquired for potential economic development purposes. It's not like you
Right.
inherited land from somebody that left it to you in their will or whatever.
it wasn't purchased with the intent of making it Parkland.
Okay. Well, if you no longer have economic development expectations for that land, then yeah, go ahead and sell it. And as far as listing goes, there may be some hoops to jump through, but I don't think there's many.
But we don't have to sell
you
it
don't
either.
ha- No, you can sit on it and
Let it grow in value. That brings it, sorry.
But if we find the offer that was presented to us acceptable, we don't have to go out and solicit. We
no,
don't need to go see what the fair market value of it is,
well,
as far as requirements go forward.
well, where the fair market value is concerned, when I said later, you don't have to sell anything for fair market value, I was talking about selling it as for a project. If you're just gonna sell land, you've got tract of land, 5.5 acres that you're not using, you've got to have an economic development reason for accepting less than fair market value. It's not as if there's a statute that says you go to jail for accepting less, but you're expected to get at least fair market value.
But if it's creating jobs and things,
Well,
Then it's a project.
Say if the proposed go in there was a strip mall.
if you've got a developer or somebody who wants to create some sort of economic development project on that land, then yeah, by all means, that's what you're here for.
How much of our budget, if any, can be put towards investing? Is any of that allowed to be sit in CDs or have money set aside for growing it that way, or is kind of like a contingency
In
fund?
my experience, when an EDC invests money, it's because they've got reserves.
Right.
I don't counsel any EDC to go out and buy stock or act as a,
Trying to grow money
as a
that way.
citizen. Yeah, in fact, I think that would be prohibited. So, there isn't a rule as far as how much you're allowed to invest. If you've got funds that aren't being used, they should be identified in your budget. And if you put them in text pool or whatever, that's typical. But you're doing it because you want to get some return on that cash that's not, doesn't have a.
Right. So if we wanted to take 100,000 and go buy Bitcoin, that would be highly frowned upon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because I think it's a pyramid scheme, but anyway. Any owners of Bitcoin here that want to take me out?
That.
I'll visit you in your mansion.
Yeah, no, Bitcoin's on its way
There, I'm
out.
sorry, so there's a pyramid scheme.
Good to know.
Anything else? Okay,
Doug, anything you want to add to the
Fascinating.
minutes?
all right. Well, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Yes, thank you. Can you make the copies of that or then give them back to him? I'm sorry. Do you need those back? Those 3 pages?
No, no,
Oh, okay. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you very much
absolutely.
for everything over the past.
Well, I'm not-
Really quick, with the board's permission,
Yeah.
I've drinking more than half of this giant soda. With the board's permission,
Break time?
is the board good with a 5-minute intermission before we move on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the time is currently 7:41. We will take a 5-minute break. Time is 7:47. We are resuming this special meeting and workshop of the Bandera EDC. We are now on agenda 5B, discussion on current EDC assets and plan for the year. Okay. So, big one that everybody wanted to discuss, and from the last meeting, y'all scheduled a workshop for tonight, with the intent of talking about the land. So, this is, we left all the wording vague, so that we can go into all kinds of stuff with a workshop. So, we can talk about the lands, intended uses. All y'all just heard from the attorney. I think it was a lot of really good insights of what we can do with what we have as assets, what we can't do. And basically the spirit overall of what an EDC is for and bringing stuff in, so. At this point, orderly open discussion on what we plan on doing with this land. So, and,
You're talking about all our land, aren't you?
yeah, well, we can talk about all the lands. I know that the intent from the last meeting was specifically, the land that we've been discussing for months that we've got offers on. And we encourage, input and talking points from everybody in the audience as well, with this being a workshop, so. If you have something to contribute, just please raise your hand and we will get to y'all. So, who wants to kick this?
Okay.
Yeah, say something.
I say we start by talking about kind of what our goals are, just more the direction of what kind of EDC do we want to be and what do we want to push, is how I see it. If we want to focus on parks, great. If we want to do infrastructure, great. If we want to do, whatever. But I think that should direct kind of the path of our land ideas. I think we direct that first. If that makes sense to everyone. Yeah. Okay.
So what would your goals be?
I'm thinking, personally, I really like the ideas of a lot of Simple City stuff we've seen has incorporated really great ideas and the city spent a ton of money on it. So I would like our focus to be putting those ideas into action to keep that momentum going, would be my thoughts. One thing I really liked that I heard was the affordable housing statute, because that gives us an opportunity to do 2 things, which I think are very needed here. And one thing I really liked with Simple City was their idea of combining housing and businesses and kind of making that more cohesive. And, you know, Bandera is so small as it is, I think that's a great idea. So I think if we have the opportunity to do that, that brings in, that would be a focus for me on some of the land. Now, obviously, that's not feasible on all of it based on where it is, but that's kind of my direction.
You mean a live workspace?
Yes.
So I will say that with what the city did with Simple City, prior to them coming in and being on the Planning and Zoning Commission, there was a lack of direction to any of the committees from the city on that, which was a big push for bringing Simple City in with a comprehensive master plan. I see that as being a prime directive of the way that the city wants to go. I am a huge advocate, huge lover of affordable housing. I specifically think we're missing housing for the middle class. Now,
And lower.
and, well,
Well, I think now
think
because
we-
it's so expensive that
yes.
everyone that's not upper is lower because
Yes.
you're getting priced out of the market
Well,
here.
that's a good way of putting it.
You know, I mean, if you want to stay in, and that's what I like about. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, so, but I also think that we need to have that wagon wheel approach like I've talked about before. We can't just be focused on one item. We've got to keep infrastructure in our minds. We've got to keep parks in our minds, because that allows the ability for more grants for the city, which allow much more opportunities.
Right.
We can't just focus on affordable housing. I think we need to take that wagon wheel approach, but I think the new comprehensive master plan that the city adopted is that guiding way for us to do
Principle.
that, yes.
What I really like about the business and housing together is that obviously it enables two things. So you're providing housing and convenient housing to a business. So you're pretty much asking a business owner to move in there, you know, which is what I love. But you're absolutely right. We need to diversify our, you know, our goals as well. And obviously infrastructure needs to be something that we address and how we help with that, because that's obviously our main guiding principle, I feel like. So I think that should be a big part of it. And not that this really necessarily has to do with the land, unless we could find a way to use it in some way, but, you know, I really like job training for our kids and for our community, and I don't think that we need to put in the huge infrastructure of building it, but I do like the idea of being able to bring in people to help train our locals and promote them having, you know, careers here so they can stay here and they're trained and they have a, you know, skill. So that's kind of the direction I would like to try and find ways of making this land work for us. Anyone else?
As
I
far
think
as,
y'all are both sort of saying the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, I think we're all
I
in
think
agreement.
it's a,
Does anyone else have any input?
I'm in agreement that I think we need to look at all the aspects. And I like your example of a wagon wheel, which each one of these properties has separate spokes.
Yeah, I agree. So maybe we go through each one and look at the highest and best use we think that might be for that land, and just kind of give us a basis to start or direction to go off of. So, anyone want to pick which one we start with?
I like that. Before we go into individuals,
Sure.
does anybody in the audience have any input on what they think as far as best guidance for the EDC and how we're going about that direction?
Affordable housing is absolutely critical. The parks are absolutely critical. Infrastructure at the same time. I do know, and it will have to be augmented, but the EDA Act, or the funds, that can, if the city is successful, that can go a long way to work on the critical issue of infrastructure. I know that there's the potential of having the small housing and above businesses, but if we don't have a business percolator to bring businesses in to do that are willing to live above their their property or their rental, that will not be successful. So a business incubator climate could be a lot of successful project. A lot of other communities have created business incubators. In a sense, you, Jared, were a business incubator. You chose to become what you are now, working with leather, and you went and did your own apprenticeship. But you could have done that in an incubator situation and then branched out. We don't have, I can't think of businesses that are ready to come in here that would be successful, we don't already have competition for. So, is that
Yeah,
making sense what I just said? The other idea of that end of that property, we are being, there's gonna come a point in time that the reality of an in-town or in-county food bank is not gonna go away. And that is job training for some of the people, and it also is job training the elderly can make money off of. And as we continue to grow, the mental health services and all of those things will become increasingly critical. I mean, so I see both sides. I would love to see that use of the property on Buck Creek be a mixed media kind of format so that you have businesses on top, but without a business plan to attract those businesses, just to build it, they will come. Look how many times, and Jerry can attest to this, how many times the business is open and closed in Bandera Village? I mean, in terms of rentals and such. It needs to almost be a cohesive grouping of businesses there. I mean, one that complements other. Artsy craftsy, you've got a glass blower on one end, you've got the leathersmith on the other end. I mean, it comes to the village concept. That's my the area down along the river that you've bought. That's wonderful for creating more park space. And then I'm not sure what other piece of property, but I know there is the property by City Park. It has served itself well as a overflow parking lot when there are events in the city. And having food trucks down there on occasion, that would be a good purpose for that. It is definitely in the floodplain if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
So, you asked for opinions, I'm offering them.
I love it.
Going back to you talking about services in the community, what would be your top 3 that you would like to see brought to help people? Is it the food bank?
Well, the food bank's a given, because at some point in time, having everybody go to Mansfield Park or whatever, or having the availability of food here, that piece of property is not in the floodplain that I am aware of. And I'm actually a futurist. A lot of my concern and time right now is focused on April 8th, 2024. And I heard, that's the eclipse, solar eclipse. And I heard it said by someone that we know we're gonna have a natural disaster, we just don't know how bad it's gonna be. In the sense of the amount of people in the community. It's a planned natural disaster. So the storage and things it will take to pull that off. So a solid, I don't see Buck Creek becoming, unless there is a true plan that's got for the business development that would take all that space, I don't see people wanting upstairs apartments above their property. We need to come up, the EDC needs to come up with, and I'm sure not the person to do it, but an incubator, like somebody like Doug that was sitting here. He's a lawyer, he doesn't care where he lives. I mean, with the sense of, if he has high-speed internet and all of those requirements. That's the audience to start bringing in. We're an aging out community. I'm one of them, so I know that.
And I believe our demographics,
Show
Keep
that.
getting older.
keep getting older.
Right. The tiny houses, on the one hand, that Simple City suggests, I have a piece of property, my 40 by 40 garage or 20 by 40 garage, whatever it is, would fit within that modality or model, I just would need to convert it. And I could even possibly put on my property another tiny home. Well, Laura's got a huge piece of, I think in a lot of ways that tiny home concept they were going to. And I know Jared said on P and Z, when the mansion already talked about their plans. That's not gonna be affordable housing. That's going to be people that buy those condos or townhomes that wanna have, they have fluid income, they want a place to stay when they come to Bandera. They're not gonna live
They're
in
gonna
a
be
condo.
vacation homes and,
Yes.
and Airbnbs the rest of the time.
Right. Well, the Simple City rules ruled that out. They have to be living in the property, on the property. But that's a significant rule that's in place, but there's enough people out there that love this area, that have the fluid income, to say, well, I'm just gonna go to my townhome in Bandera for the weekend.
Tony?
I just want to clarify that the mansion sits in the business commercial, and they are not under that same rule as the have to live on site to have an Airbnb or a vacation. That's only in the, it's only what currently is considered
Is it
single
legal?
family. That's the only one that has that criteria with the 60%.
That's P3, right?
Yeah. But, I mean, that's just my take on things. Thank you, Tony.
It doesn't know
So that was just my food
Yeah,
for
no,
thought.
it's great, because it does make us think that's a huge thing. We need to bring a younger, working, age people to the area.
So it goes,
So how
Well,
do we
like-
do that?
Deanna. Cute little, if y'all don't know, she owns Miss Fitz Boutique. If you had a spot like that,
Oh, I would take it in a heartbeat. I really would.
right.
okay. So, yeah,
But that would be a question too. What about the businesses that are already here? What interest would they have? Might be something to propose to some of the, because I'm not the only one in town with just the little, cute little shops. And there's a lot of people that have the little craft,
But
the little booths.
I think there's enough people in similar situations to like you and
agree.
I, single parent,
Sure,
be able to live above your work
right,
and homeschool and do everything else, have everything all in one central loop. I
Yeah,
think there's
That
enough,
is not the price of the town homes.
no,
Yes.
no.
But yeah, and so, I know y'all are trying to get the businesses in, but I think that there's a lot of interest maybe in town of businesses that would wanna do that. And businesses that may expand, that are already in some of the little, booth rental spaces, that might say, hey, we can expand a little bit, have this and save some overhead because we're all in one place.
You'd be fine with moving off Main Street for that? I'm
Probably.
just throwing out
No,
a
probably,
question.
because, like y'all are talking about affordable, housing, affordable business rent is tough.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I could get something to kind of, combine that, then absolutely. And you
And-
just, you would just have to make sure that, of course, if it's like you said, if you just have one, what you call about the village, that, the way they're in and out, if you just have a couple of places there, then it's not gonna draw a lot of people there. But if you have a plan to have the whole place, like you said, glass blower on one end, and
I mean-
to make people want to go there, then being off of Main isn't such a big deal. If I was off of Main by myself, probably I'd have to go,
No,
Yeah.
obviously that would be up to the developer, but what
Right.
I see is like what Simple City drew up, that is up on the wall over there.
Yeah.
Of the ideas,
Yeah.
the concepts they had drawn up for that,
Right.
literally
It's
that
basically a whole
following.
nother draw for the
Yeah.
city, a whole nother Main Street in so many ways. And I think that's an excellent point you made about, maybe there's some sort of incentive to bring existing businesses to expand or to move to this kind of, and that would also allow us to maybe get in there and help with some of the infrastructure of Main Street and getting into some of those buildings, and maybe us helping bring Main Street back alive once we've, set up another avenue to start driving some great business.
Kinda like moving our lights out of one Connex box so that we
Yeah.
clean up the after. And then utilize
A
both.
bigger box, just saying.
Realize that
We didn't need to go with a small box.
commercial space is really limited here in Bandera. I mean, I have people come in the store all the time and they're talking about, we wanna bring in this business. I have so many people want a consignment shop here in town, I think would go over fantastic, but they don't have anywhere to, I mean, you don't have any options.
Mhm. So I think the need for,
Affordable options, yeah, you're right.
I think the need for residential over commercial exists in the city. I think realistically, that is up to a developer. And like, when we talk to the Boyles, they're not gonna put in the money to do the hardcore studies and stuff
Right.
until they've got a guarantee from us, but a developer has a lot more of that knowledge to,
Can we work with
To
the
decide.
developer, or is that beyond our
I
scope?
think, no, I think that's
and-
part of negotiations to say, we'd like to work with you, or we can offer these types of incentives on land break, like land break incentives, if you put in a performance agreement that you're willing to do these types of things, like make sure that, we're willing to discount some of this land this much to impact as much as possible to make sure that these are, middle-class housing, or affordable housing, or,
But you're talking about if we sell to someone. What if
Yes.
we develop it? Can we do that or no? If we wanted to be in charge of, we took Simple Cities Plan, we as a board have an idea for how we wanna grow this, we build it, and then we, have those incentives with business owners already set up that they can either then come in and buy it from us or lease it from us. But we're kinda holding the reins on making sure this gets done how we want it and staying involved in it and not getting other people so much
we
involved.
can. My long-term concern with that is every year we've got new board members with a new idea.
Yeah.
Every,
We really don't have that
every
much
2
money.
years, we've got new council members that have new ideas on how they wanna see stuff go. And the amount of money, capital-wise, that we would put into that, I think there'd be a return on that. I think I don't think that's the wisest, I'm not even gonna say wise. I don't think that's the greatest direction for us to go, to become not business owners, but
That'd be a lot of work
retail leasees. That would be a lot of work
Yeah.
for volunteers.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
volunteers, that was
Yeah, I
right.
think
you're
we're
running out
doing
the door,
that.
who's gonna do all
I
that?
think it would be cost prohibitive. I
I do
don't
too.
think
We
you've got
couldn't
enough
afford it.
money for the next
No, then we have
10,
no money
15
for anything
years.
else.
Even if you put every penny into it.
I agree.
It's gonna take somebody with some cash.
Exactly.
Right.
And then we restrict the cash, we restrict the
don't-
assets that we do have on hand to be able to take care of stuff.
Right.
No, you're absolutely right. We don't have deep enough pockets for that kind of.
And one of the other things, throwing out the wagon wheel thing, is we should always be cognizant of having enough in the honey pot for when something happens,
A
like
disaster.
when a disaster happens. When COVID first happened, for those of you that weren't when COVID first happened, the EDC was able to put out a bunch of grants for businesses that were greatly affected by COVID, and help them out that way, so.
And did we ever put in the hours then?
So, yeah, keeping in mind that keeping a honey pot for when a flood happens or something like that, that the economy isn't destroyed for a long period of time waiting for federal and state help, that we can immediately impact people, so,
Excellent point.
okay.
I wanna start looking Maple and 10th. What do you guys wanna do with Maple and 10th?
That's the gravel parking lot.
That's 0.18 acres, yes.
Yeah, I agree with Pat on that. It fills up when it's needed, and you really can't build on it, can you?
No, it's in the floodplain.
Right, so just have to charge for that parking.
Well,
So, 2024, we have two
eclipse.
we have two eclipses back to back that we're pretty close to the epicenter of. We've already got to start planning for parking and things like that. The more parking we can provide, not necessarily the EDC, but the city as a whole, that's away from viewing areas where they can take shuttles and things like that from the viewing area so that automatic headlights don't turn on in the middle of the total solar eclipse.
Never thought of that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my
City lights
goodness.
need to be turned
If
off.
you
Oh,
wanna
my
know,
goodness.
there is a whole disaster plan around this, emergency management is involved. Patricia is on top of all of this. They started planning a year ago for this because there will be people from all over the world packed in here. And they will be trying to pack into every farm pasture and everything else. And there is a plan on how to hold city events post
Right, to hold them.
post eclipse to hold people here so you don't wind up with
Right.
a disastrous traffic plan going back to the city afterwards. So
Right.
trying to mitigate how much traffic is on the road immediately following the eclipse by doing events the day and 2 days afterwards, so.
So everyone doesn't leave at once.
So, yeah.
Amen.
So, just to start running,
There it is.
this is obviously great use as a parking lot. One idea maybe we have for it, what about EV charging stations?
That would be brilliant.
Thank you. It was mine. Please note that in the record, okay?
I love that idea, especially the proximity to downtown.
Yeah.
That
Um,
is something we desperately need.
Okay.
how
Are there-
often, so they've got EV charging stations directly across from Hio Silver,
Okay.
in that church parking lot that's right there.
Yes.
They've got
I
one.
saw 'em.
Yeah.
How often,
One.
do we
Two
know
at
how
Best
often they're
Western.
used?
Oh, that's right, two at
Best
Best
Western
Western.
has
Yeah.
one,
Right.
and then,
They're going to, a lot of the people
BEC
know
has
they only
one.
have a at most a 400-mile radius, or one way.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're here for the eclipse,
Right, we're here for fortune looking.
and we're gonna go back to wherever it is. Those stations are gonna be important. How many television ads are you seeing for standard cars now that are all electric? Meaning the GMs and the blah and the Fords and
Hyundai.
such.
So, I love the idea as an overflow parking lot. I love the idea of EV charging. I know that BEC specifically has, a group just for that will come out and work with us.
How much is it charged how much do you pay to use one of those things? Has anybody tried it?
It depends. I mean, it depends on what you want to offer. I mean, like if you go to HEB, I know for a while they would let you do it because then you're going in shopping, spending money. So you can have it like that, or they charge you, and it all just depends on where you're at.
Well,
So
Elon
we could
Musk
make
might
some money
bring-
off that?
We ask him.
Ask him real nice. I'll go.
Yeah.
You can find
Okay.
me for that one.
Yeah.
But we still own the land and you
Yeah.
kinda lease
I
the
mean, he's here in
EV
Texas
equipment to the company,
So-
and so
I'd
we
be
still
very-
make money on it?
Have
There's-
you reached out to him for the?
I have not yet, but it's on my radar.
Okay,
She does,
hey,
I don't work in this year.
one person at a time, please.
But she asked a direct question. I
Yes,
answered
yeah.
it.
There are multiple different ways to do that.
Okay.
So basically, it would be us talking with BEC
Yeah,
to see what
yeah,
the options are for us.
that sounds
Laura?
good.
I was just gonna mention, I believe they put the charging station in the Methodist Church parking
They
lot
did.
free of charge.
Oh,
So that
So-
could be an incentive. Or,
There are,
Right.
Jerry?
I was just gonna say that, and you'll probably do it anyway, but they probably, BSC probably can tell you how much usage they have on those meters.
that's
Right.
interesting.
And to do it for a one-time event, I mean, it might get used a lot during that one event, but I don't know what the down the road
So I'm
need
thinking,
for
I'm
it's gonna
also,
be.
I'm
I don't
looking
know.
at that lot as proximity to 11th Street.
Right,
So Saturday, I go out almost every Saturday night. That's the one night I get to go be an adult. The EDC parking lot right across from 11th Street is always packed. Same with every Wednesday night when I go. And then the church parking lot is always at least half full. And that's not with the events that we have going on in town. So more, and we've heard that from Simple City, and we've heard that from two day trippers and everything else, is more public parking in the city off Main Street. So if we could make that with wayfinding signs and things like that, like here is another public parking area, make it a designated parking that's only a block away from 11th Street and
Right, they can go shopping. You
They
said they
can-
were
they
gonna
can go
go to
shopping,
HEB,
things like
they can go
that.
shopping downtown,
and
come back with a voucher, whatever.
so we know that the other parking lot that we have for free parking is used constantly.
Right.
Constantly.
I'd
So,
say it's
this-
the most used parking lot in town.
yeah.
Mm-hmm, oh yeah, definitely.
I do have one
Patricia.
comment back on the use of the EV cars. Because my family is in Austin, I can tell you, you are seeing more and more of the Teslas roll out. In particular, my brother-in-law is a true fan of Elon Musk's. Elon Musk is giving cars to Hertz to use as rental cars.
Yep.
So it's not a joke. Pickup lovers aren't driving them yet, but it's coming.
Well, they're coming out with the
Rivian.
they're coming
Have
out
you
with the
seen the
Tesla
Rivian?
pickup.
I want one of
I
those.
know.
Have you
Ford.
seen the
Ford
Rivian?
has
Where
one.
you charge,
Yep.
you can fire up your home.
Okay, Laura.
Newsflash, there is an EV truck,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
amazing. They don't have it.
Another possibility for that parking lot is something Patricia mentioned, is possibly putting food trucks in there.
That might be an expense to bring electricity to that property, so it's more
Right.
appealing.
Right, and water.
Now that is part of the residential zone, so we got to keep that in mind too. Being on that
Well-
side of 10th, being on 10th.
You already have electric outlets in the park,
Well, I mean,
go in there.
anything that we
You
do with
can't.
that parking
You can't?
lot, whether we're bringing food trucks or anything like that, how it affects the next door neighbors.
Right.
Because we also want to be good stewards
Sure.
of them. So, I think that's one of the considerations. I think right now, leaving that, the idea of an overflow parking with looking at putting in, because that's not going to affect neighbors if electric vehicles are charging there.
Well, I was just thinking of a
Also-
way to get some revenue.
I also think with the EV stations, another benefit of that was that we could really utilize that as kind of a marketing scheme to bring people to the area. So we could, advertise in
Advertise in
San
Austin.
Antonio and say,
Sure.
hey, come to Bandera for the weekend, free charge on your car. No, come and park your car, go look around, and we're providing free charging stations.
Advertise in Austin, tell them to come spend their money and then
Exactly.
leave on Sunday.
Exactly. There you go.
Jerry?
I don't have a clue what they charge for those things, but it'll be one thing that I'm sure you'll look at too is, how much does it really cost to charge? In other words, if you were gonna offer free charge, I mean, I think.
How much, yeah,
I don't
is
think
it
it's
gonna
cheap.
cost us money?
Right. Well, it depends. Also, I have a great resource for this. I do have a good friend who is president of a company that does charging stations, and it's like a universal charge, and they also really do part of that where it's like the marketing scheme as well, where they really bring people in and kind of, do a joint venture where they give you maybe a percentage off. We don't have to go free if you're right, the numbers aren't there. But I definitely think there's ways to utilize that as an appeal for Bandera and kind of the right kind of people with money we're trying to bring in from Austin to really spend
EVs
some
is
dough.
the wave of the future, no doubt, it's just how soon.
Right.
Yeah.
And something we could look at is maybe they don't have, no, they probably need to be. Can they bring in, this may be a stupid question, but temporary ones? If we have, like just for events?
Yes.
The load cable
Sometimes you have
size,
to-
you've gotta have something that would at least come off that pole for them to connect into.
Right.
You're gonna have to have some major power
But
there,
I
but
have
you maybe
seen
don't
them
have to have
at
the
big
stations going all the
events where they
time.
did have portable stuff set up.
Okay. That'd be a question. So does anybody else have any ideas for this land other than,
The gravel.
Just
parking lot?
One thing as far as the charging, I know that I have people at my park that have some kind of an adapter that just goes right into my 30 amp.
Right.
And I haven't even checked to see how much they've used doing it, but, so you could have electric there for other purposes and adapt.
So we could
that's interesting.
theoretically, we could put up 30 amp towers.
Yeah.
And we could have anybody, we could
You
do
could use it
anything
for
from
food
putting an
vendors.
RV there to a food vendor to,
So it
charging
could be a
vehicle station.
multi-purpose parking lot for us. Great.
So does anybody have any other
Interesting.
ideas? I like the idea of an overflow parking lot and exploring putting EV charging there. Laura?
I gave you my other idea,
Okay.
so, I mean, and we could even do both.
Yeah.
What was the other idea? I don't remember, I'm sorry.
Food
Food
trucks.
trucks.
Oh, yeah.
I think definitely that would go hand in hand. We
I
could
do
do all
too.
three. I mean, this is great
Right.
multi-purpose use, especially bringing in the electric.
Or maybe not, you know, or a inner tube rental or canoe rental or some sort of mobile.
We could lease it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah,
Overflow and lease property.
yeah.
Next.
Alright, the next one is the parking lot on 11th and Cedar, which is the free parking that everybody
Yeah,
uses, right behind the water tower.
There it is.
So, I think this is best utilized the way it's being utilized now. I don't think that there's anything else that we need to use, it's always packed.
Right.
Yeah.
I drove through it today. There's a couple of little tiny potholes we might need to look at getting fixed. Still, the stripes are still visible. Somebody did put up the handicap parking sign again. The one thing I did notice is the big tree that there by the handicap, it really needs it to be
So,
trimmed.
but that's also on Stein property.
Yeah, but you know,
So-
she's not able to do it,
Yeah,
so
yeah, but
we'll, yeah.
it's also, it is an oak, isn't it?
Mhm.
So it's
I
gotta
think
be
so.
trimmed a special way so that we don't wind up with oak, oak well. You need to have a professional arborist come out and do it,
Right.
so,
But it's hanging right over the handicap.
yeah. So we need to get with Miss Stein and let her know
Yeah.
that it needs to be done.
As far as future use for that parking lot, is it large enough for a potential future parking garage if we needed more space, like they talked about in Simplicity? It's .19, I think,
9.
so I don't know how much space you need to make it and how much that
I've
would
seen
cost.
some pretty small
Small,
parking
yeah.
garages, as
We
far
may
as
be able to-
footprint wise, so
But that
I
would be
would
close
say
to
yes,
downtown and
that,
everything.
That's a really
Just
good
keep in
idea.
mind,
Well-
the big old diesel trucks need to,
Don't we have a portion of this lot over here too? 4 entities on the catty
I
corner?
don't think so.
don't we
Your
have
sign,
what?
your name is on the sign.
Yes.
You have a partial ownership in that. That's big. You could put a garage in there. I mean, with partners.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
That's the that's the church parking lot.
Yeah, they got money.
Parking lot, unless the church needs it for a few of the, they've gone, I don't know what percentage they.
But we don't own it, we don't own any part of that,
Positive?
not 100%.
Cause I know.
I'm never 100%
Well, no,
on
but I'm
anything.
pretty certain that
I think
EDC
you're
got
right.
a lot of
Yeah, your
funds
name
for
is-
paving it. There
Yeah,
was an agreement, maybe go back to 95, 97.
I was
It
gonna
does
say,
say, thank you, Bandera, EDC, and United.
It's a good idea,
Right.
Pat.
FYI, I don't know when, but there's some sort of,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
but yeah, that would be an excellent one for a parking garage.
Yeah, it would help their new building too and all that, right? Is that them? Yeah, that's them right there. They
Yep.
put their new building, there it is, this big, yeah.
Yep.
Yep,
Okay.
all right.
Alright, next one is our lovely Buck Creek property.
Again,
That one already.
again.
You don't wanna do Hackberry first.
Yeah, we'll
You
do
wanna do Hackberry
You wanna do
first?
Hackberry
Let's do
first.
Hackberry.
Okay, Hackberry.
Is Hackberry buildable?
No,
It's in the
well,
floodplain.
Hackberry is in the floodplain.
Right, so,
Hackberry is what we said that our intent for that is to designate it as parkland so that it adds to the amount of parkland in the city so that the city's eligible for more grants. That it's not buildable on.
Right. I'd just like to see that basically kept as a wilderness area, and maybe put a plaque there, honoring the Polish settlers, because that's right, you know, where the mill route was, and,
Ooh, that could be an interesting use for it. That's a
Right.
great idea, is bringing to life kind of some of that old heritage and maybe utilizing that to be something
Yeah.
people can go and see with their kids.
just kind of walk, you know, not even really do anything to it except maybe put some benches in there.
Well, you could clear it up a little, and you could make it kind of
Yeah, you could
step
clear
back
out
in
a little bit
time.
of trees.
Yeah, you could do some clear. You could make it a nice spot for people, and it kind of look like it did back in the day. Maybe bring in some of the old equipment or things that
Yeah,
was there.
yeah, that's-
something to go and look at. You know, something to basically
Now,
a
Right.
tourist spot.
That's
Yeah.
what it
where
ought to
all the axis deer and
Oh, yeah.
all the deer
be. So
and
we
all
could
the
put
wildlife.
information about all of that. You
Yeah,
know,
I was
maybe
thinking
put
just have some plaques about the wildlife that's in there.
Oh, I know, you sell deer feed out of those little gumball machines, you know? you
well,
used
okay,
to-
so
And
really quick.
no
So
feeding the deer.
multiple things is where do people park, and are residents going to appreciate if we start sending visitor traffic down Cedar Street and Hackberry all the way down to First and Third?
A lot of visitor traffic
So-
goes and looks at the
They're
deer down
driving
those
that
neighborhoods.
area.
A lot of them-
They
a
feed
lot
the
of them
deer.
go
I've
down that
seen
way.
them feed the deer.
mean-
They throw it out the
I mean,
car
I live-
window.
You pretty much
Right
know
there.
you're in a hot spot when you live there. I feel
Yeah.
like people drive it constantly. So if you have a problem with, I mean, I think that's part of probably why you're there is because proximity to the fun stuff, you know?
Right.
And
Okay.
I think this isn't an eyesore for
Fair
people.
enough.
I don't think people are going to be
That's fair.
showing up during the day. You know, it's going to be a weekend thing. It's going to be.
I don't know. I think that would be used during the week.
I mean, I do too, but I don't think you're going to have a a
No.
packed parking lot or people not being able to get into their homes
That's
because
why
the
I
streets are
say-
full. You know.
Don't really develop it that much. Just kind of,
Leave it alone.
Stumble
But-
upon the
but, you know,
little
put some
nature. That's
a
good.
couple of parking spots,
Right.
there and.
I
So
mean,
one of
yeah,
the-
I'd like for it to drive some sort of tourism or development. You know, I know that the parks that's definitely an asset, but at the same
Right.
time, like the more we can do to bring something to the economy to add to Bandera beyond just a multi-purpose for the youth. would
So
be
I had
good.
multiple thoughts in the back of my mind when we were going through all this. One was thinking about all the overflow parking we're going to need for the eclipses. In order to make that overflow parking, we don't have to get rid of all the trees, but we do have to clean up a lot of that underbrush, which needs to be cleaned up anyways because it's inside the city
Sure.
limits and it's a fire hazard. Second was, we're the cowboy capital of the world. We don't have a stable in town. We've got multiple outfitters that people pay money to go horseback rides through town and everything else, and they don't have a place to put horses in town. They gotta haul them into town every day. My thought, and this was going back to leasing lands, you go to the big cities and you go to their parks and they've got the trains going through their parks that every parent's kid pays money to get on that train and go around the park and things. Well, we're not known for trains, but to have a stable maybe that a company leases out to keep their horses there, or paddocks that city residents who don't necessarily have enough room on their own property to keep a horse can keep a horse in a community stable for a fee. And most of your stables are going to be made with piping. So, being in the floodplain, there's things we can do to work around that and have a bare bone type of stable type thing. But that was something that I saw going into that was that could be, we could lease that to somebody
Did
to
this
come in and do
Hackberry?
something cool.
Hackberry you're talking about?
Because it's a block and a half from the backside of the city park. It goes right into a lot of the riding trails. It's a half block from the entrance to the riding trails and the wilderness portion of the park. All those types of things. So that was just one of the ideas I was thinking of. But I was thinking, if we're going to designate parkland, we still designated it as parkland, like we intended. Why don't we lease out some of this parkland to do stuff that builds that? You know, you go to our park, our city park, you pay to get into the park, but other than enjoying the river, you don't see like what you see at a lot of other places.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea for bringing in
Pony rides.
reinforcing our brand, and I think that's really critical to what we should be doing too, is everything we do should go back to the Cowboy Capital brand, because that's what drives tourism here. So everything we need to do should reflect that in some way. So I think that's a great idea. How do you think people will feel being next to a stable? And is 2.2 acres enough?
Again, we would have, that's something we'd have to talk to neighbors about, and that's something that's something that would go into a lot more study, but that's just one of the ideas I saw for it. That idea doesn't necessarily have to be there either. It could be, we could get with the city about doing that in another part of the actual river park, or another
we could
property,
lease the 10th,
or 10th Street,
yeah, we could list
or
10th Street there too,
You know,
that same thing.
we could lease out 10th Street and have somebody just put up panel,
That's
Horse
better,
panels.
because it's already cleared.
and, yeah.
Okay.
Patricia,
The horseback riding outfitters have been quite successful where they're located with their trailers. I'd almost opt to see the stables being where the trailers are, and they would be temporary trailers, because the real outfitters, they're not gonna wanna leave their horse in a stable overnight without them nearby.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that works real well. It's easy to tell people how to find them, and it gives them immediate access to the river
Yeah.
without, and
I was
there's
gonna say-
plenty of parking down there, cause I've delivered quite a few people down there and given instructions.
where are their trailers?
Okay, if you get on Cypress Street, go tell,
Past Public Works.
yes, just
To
past
the
Public
bathroom.
Works on the left.
Yeah.
And it's clearly marked that it's trailer parking, it's under shade trees.
I know where you're talking.
And that
Okay.
works beautifully, it's under shade trees.
Yes.
It's already caliched, so the land is beat down, and there's a waiting area, and if somebody is not riding, there's access to the shade trees and or taking a walk in City Park. The one on Hackberry, remember, that's also very close to the disc golf course. So,
So
and
more
one of the
parking.
things years ago, when I was sitting on one of these meetings, a dog park for part of it. That's benefiting our citizens. But think how many winter Texans have their dogs. Having a dog park where they could just enjoy.
Where they could chase all the axes.
You got it?
Yeah, that's my thought. After rescuing,
love it. I
after
love
rescuing one Sunday morning, the dog
Drive.
had gotten, and, oh, it was,
Drive all
it was
those
drama.
axes to Polly Peak.
But anyway,
I
that's
kinda
just,
like my axes.
they're good eating.
Yes,
So
they are.
we did buy this with the intent of making it Parkland.
Right.
But we have the ability to do lots of different stuff with it,
Sure.
overflow parking,
How about a
all kinds
splash
of other
pad?
stuff. Ever had hand, foot, mouth? hand,
Now
mouth?
that I'd have a problem with. I don't want all those little screaming kids around my house.
No.
Sounds like the skate park.
Now we see why she wants to keep it nice and how it is. She's like, let's keep it just, manicure it, maybe a bench, a walking trail, connecting to my house.
Right,
You'd name it Laura's Park?
yeah, that's
Yeah. Laura's bench, Laura's park, Laura's lights.
Okay, Buck Creek.
Well, let's bring the Boyles back and let's hear what they have to say. That was
So,
Wait, this
were
is,
you
Oh, I'm sorry.
were you at 2 meetings ago?
2 or 3.
Okay, so
I think you missed that, the one
I think you might have been.
Yeah.
So I was encouraging, I went and sat down with the Boyles personally. After having sat down with them, I was very impressed with what their vision was, even though, like you said and I expressed during that first meeting, what I saw as a lack of, this is what we're going to do with it. Because they don't want to they're not going to put in a ton of money into something that they don't already have a guarantee to. I suggest to all the board members to try to schedule a time to go sit down with them individually and ask all those questions and say, hey, walk me through your vision. give me the warm and fuzzy that what you're talking about. I suggest that, I encourage that. It's not something that, I think that's better done one-on-one, and we're not going to get, you're individually, you're not gonna get the same results as if we could just call them back here and have them sit down in a workshop and explain to the whole board. The other thing is time matters. To me, this has been going on long enough
Right.
without a solid yes or no, with the constant, well, let's call them back in for a workshop. If
They
you
were
got,
very eager last meeting to come in and do the workshop,
absolutely,
and as I was,
absolutely.
so.
But I don't see
Didn't
them.
they say they wouldn't be back again?
What's that?
No,
Didn't
they said
say
they
at the last
wanted,
meeting, go ahead and
I-
have your workshop, they
I
would be
wasn't
there?
here,
No.
so I don't know.
no, it was very positive, there wasn't any
100%. I mean,
negativity.
this,
I think they did say
it kinda
that.
just is discussion on
I
current
don't
EDC
remember.
assets and plan for the year. It's not really specific as to, hey, what is your plan? It didn't say anything
Right.
about
Yeah.
maybe another line item discussing it with
So I
Jim,
think-
so it's kinda vague.
And again, like I said at the beginning of this, we left all the wording vague so we can get into all kinds of different,
Right,
so that wasn't vague on, we don't want them to show up.
of course.
But I think if you've got questions that you want to know about, schedule a meeting with them, go through them. I think my personal feelings on the,
I think they're gonna
with this.
walk.
my personal feelings with this is dragged on long enough.
Right.
We either owe them a yes or a no, one way or the other, versus well, let's schedule another meeting with them.
Then you gotta start drawing up contracts and you gotta have
Well,
specifics
The
and all
the board's
those.
already given me permission to enter into negotiations with them, which.
Did you do that?
We have, and I came back to the board with where we sat, and then the board decided that they wanted to start exploring other options, like the possibility of putting it on the market and soliciting, seeing what we have.
That's
And
true, I
going in,
remember.
and going into workshops and things like that, but we're
Well,
not
I
gonna
didn't hear
get,
any
we're,
specifics.
we're not going to, in our last executive in our last executive session, I came back with the negotiations that we had entered, what the negotiation terms were that they had agreed to, brought that back. They're not going to have specifics on exactly what they're gonna build, what the costs of stuff are, because all that costs money to get into until they've got a guarantee on land. All we can really do is understand a vision and go, okay, in my mindset as a board member on the EDC, is that vision that they're saying meet within what we're trying to accomplish, or myself as an individual on the board trying to accomplish with the EDC? And do I have the warm and fuzzy that what they're saying is what they're actually gonna follow through with?
I thought they made very smart points, and it's a special area, it's gonna require special people, to wanna be there and to commit to it, and I thought they were right on and very smart about it.
Yeah.
So I was interested in talking to them, that's all.
Okay, so
Really
I
talking
would
to them.
suggest, instead of asking for another workshop with them, I would suggest setting a meeting individually with them. Because that can be done, you could set up a meeting with them tomorrow versus,
Where, the hardware store?
yeah, or at the real estate office, or versus if we
Or
set
here.
another meeting, that's gotta be posted 72 hours out.
Right.
We gotta call another special meeting or workshop. We typically only have one meeting a month. If you wanna have another workshop, that waits until the next meeting, or we call a special meeting. And this keeps getting
Well,
drug
you're
out.
already in negotiations. So,
It's not a done deal.
It's not a done deal. Those negotiations come back to the board says yay or nay, the board says, go back and negotiate this.
I feel like going one-on-one to them is talking out of school. I have carried no weight. I wouldn't feel right going.
So
to
you're not
them
not
one-on-one.
negotiating with them, you're asking
No, I
them to
didn't say
walk you
that. I
through.
said talking with them.
That's absolutely 100% within your scope as a board member and encouraged. Because that's you trying to, as an individual board member, saying, walk me through your vision, what is it that you're trying to do?
diligence.
It's due diligence,
Is what it is. I mean,
Individual due diligence.
yes,
I
Laura.
basically think one of the things we might want to ask ourselves tonight is, do we want to sell the property?
There you
Everybody
go.
came to us, we didn't put it out there.
We did bring this
You know,
up
that's a
before.
question I think we need to ask ourselves.
Well, I think that train left the station though, because we have
No,
had that
the train has not
conversation
left the
before.
station. Not at all. We can still say, no, we wanna hold on to this property, we want to explore other options.
All right, let's do it.
Well, as a board,
We can't vote on it tonight, but we can make a motion at
Well,
our
at least
meeting.
it's in action.
Well, I mean, but I'm just,
so really,
I think
okay,
that's really where we're at,
really,
isn't it?
real, great point, really quick. What does everybody, do y'all, and
What do the Boyles wanna do with it?
so the Boyles want to do a mixed use, commercial, residential, very similar to what Simple City had envisioned, and it's specifically this piece of land right here.
Okay.
That's what I was just gonna say, can we break it down into individual parcels?
It's already,
And start with that,
it's
that's something, so start with one parcel.
okay, so the one parcel, if you're looking at your map on the far right of it,
Right,
which is on the corner of Old, what is
right.
that?
Old San Antonio.
Old
Highway.
San
San
Antonio
Antonio
Highway.
Highway.
The most
and Buck Creek.
commercial parcel.
So their vision is to do a mixed commercial residential. And they don't have like 60-40 or any of those numbers because they don't know, they're not going to invest the money into figuring out economic impact and feasibility studies and all that type of stuff until they've actually got a commitment on the land.
Do they know what kind of commercial?
They-
At all? Specific?
So there
No
isn't,
specifics at
there,
all.
and with our new zoning, they're not required as specific. A commercial is a commercial is a commercial. So it could be an optometrist that puts a doctor's office in there. It could be a computer repair guy. It could be a leather worker. It could be somebody making hair bows. It could be anything. So that's their vision for it. I've expressed to them, and it was expressed to them multiple times in these meetings, that affordable housing is one of the major concerns for the city as far as alligators closest to the boat, and they understand that. When I went and sat down individually before going into negotiations, and I said, okay, walk me through this, because I didn't feel like I had a good idea of what you guys wanted. When they walked me through it, I got the warm and fuzzy that they had the best, Bandera's best economic interest in mind, and weren't just trying to make a quick buck off of this. That's the feeling I got. I want everybody to get their own feeling. I think a mixture of ideas on a board is a great thing, and I want, so, yes. I was very skeptical at first when they first came in with the proposal.
And this specific parcel is what they're talking about.
That specific parcel,
Well,
out of the four, just that one is what they're looking at.
okay,
See, that wouldn't be clear.
that's a specific, I didn't know. That's good.
I'd
No.
also like to,
Wait a second.
okay,
This is not right though.
I think I may have misspoke on that. Let me look back at their proposal, because
Oh,
I think it
okay.
might be the 3 lots.
that's
I
what I
think they
thought.
just took out the one that Silver Sage wanted on the far left.
I think you're right, because
And then they wanted the rest of the other 3 lots that we own.
I think that's right.
Right, but they can't work on all of them at the same time.
So
not?
not,
And that's a
not
huge
this one.
space, I don't
But
know,
these
they got a
three.
lot
They're
of
not
money
the
there.
Yes, correct.
This is Silver Sage.
That, well,
that's
They
Silver
want-
Sage
yes.
right there.
Not yet, but they,
that's the
okay.
one lot
And
that
then
Silver
so
Sage
these
is asking.
3 lots.
Yes, is what the Boyles were asking for. Yes.
So if we entered into a contract with them, there would be a performance agreement, I'm assuming?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, and so how is that negotiated? Is it, so basically you would say, okay, we would consider or accept this price, but there will be a performance agreement based on
no,
your use?
actually,
So we can put in whatever stipulation we want. So we can say, yes, So they came to us with a price that they were willing to pay for it. We can come back and say, yes, we accept that price and sell it just like that. We can come back and say, no, we want this price and counteroffer them. We can come back and say, yes, we're willing to accept that price. However, we want you to break ground on a development within 1 year of the closing date. We want you to do this. We can put whatever types of stipulations like that we want on it. We can come back and say, you know what? Economic or affordable housing is a major concern for us. So we are willing to sell it at less than what you just offered it to us for in order to keep the price down. If you can guarantee us that that will be middle class housing, because middle class in Bandera is 48,000 a year average household. So if you're telling us at the end of it, which is a really hard thing for a builder to do because building costs and everything else fluctuate, but we could put those types of stipulations in the negotiations. Now, whether or not they accept that is different. That's the negotiation back and forth. But we can put any of that type of stuff on there.
Do they have a builder already?
No, they're not even going to go any further into the process until they know whether or not we're
Well,
willing
there
to
were
sell
two
it to them.
builders recommended to me at the Bernie EDC who work with them and who are members. And I still think it would be wise to talk to them.
That would be due diligence on your part. Absolutely. Go talk to them. No, I mean, if you
you? Are you scared of them?
No, but I don't know what to say. I have no knowledge in this area.
What you said was great. What's your plan?
Yeah, what's your plan?
Exactly.
I'll say if we
How
have
do you want to
business.
benefit Bandera? What are you hoping to accomplish?
Right, I could email them this and, right.
I mean, to me,
No,
I'm,
They could work
Go.
with them, because I heard, the appliance doctor told me the other day he was at the mansion working and he wants to use a local builder. Well, he can't find one, so I was gonna give him, contact the Bernie EDC. He wants to stay local and keep the money in the community, but you can't find anybody. Right. Right.
yes, Laura.
I also want to let you know I have figured out who the healthcare company is that's coming in.
Oh,
And
great.
I am not at liberty to just say their name. But,
I know who they are, but I can't tell you.
Right.
but I'm serious. And they are seriously looking at buying property.
On 16 or? I
Are they
can't
going to
say.
approach us? Do you have any idea if they might approach us?
I don't know if they know that this property is even available. So
Well, just to get
I
to
have
know us
not
or
approached
have
them
anything,
because
bring us
I
their
didn't
idea.
know where this board was going, but if you want me to approach them, I will.
I mean, I'm not trying to say about anything specific, but just about love to make contact and
Right.
what we could do to help them be successful here.
And it's not
be
to
a part
take
of
away from the
plan.
Boyles, maybe these builders can build for the Boyles. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Well,
is-
and it could all work together.
Right.
I,
Right,
There's lots of
do we
irons
need
in
to
the fire.
explore other
right.
what direction
Okay,
do you
so
want to go?
our intent with this property, I would like to see this property have an economic impact on Bandera. So I would
Yes.
like to see it sold, regardless of who it's sold to somebody who's going to make an economic
Yes.
impact on. I think
Bottom
we're at a point where we don't need to hold on to this property for an extended period of time. At this point, yeah, that's my thoughts. Lauren?
I have no clear ideas right now.
Okay,
I can agree with that.
okay. Laura?
I think we need to explore other opportunity out there, is my
But
opinion.
as far as the intent for the property,
Yes,
do we
I
hold
do.
it or do we sell it? Whether we're
I'm
exploring
kinda in
or
the
not.
mood to hold
Okay.
until we explore our options.
Okay, when I say hold, long-term hold on gain, or?
I don't say
When I
like
say
20
sell, we
years.
can still explore the options, but
Okay.
we wanna, I'm not saying sell right this second.
Yeah, I'm thinking we ought to look at, I don't think we should, sell to the first first person just because they came and made us an offer. I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm thinking we ought.
Are you gonna contact, if you contact the medical,
I
I'll
will.
contact the builders.
Okay, I just think that we, as a group, need to,
Yes. Who are you
To
gonna contact?
explore all
You
our
need to
options.
contact
Who
somebody.
do you want me to
You
contact?
figure out a business you like and.
My husband's got a great
So-
business. I'll talk to
The
him
lady
tonight.
out here wants to say something.
Yes.
Missed it.
Well, I was just gonna ask if, cause I know Laura, you were kind of on board when the property was sold and the healthcare thing was a big deal. I don't necessarily think that that's gonna be like an economic impact, but the consensus
jobs?
was for the public that it was really needed.
Right.
So weigh in those options too. Is it something that's gonna be economically impactful? Or would it be something that is just really needed here?
I would
for
think
the
it was,
community?
I think it's both, very needed for the community,
Right.
and the amount of jobs that you
Well,
bring
that's
with
what I
a
think
Right.
too,
clinic,
and I just wanna put that out there.
And the
that
amount
when
of-
the property was,
the amount of
Right.
healthcare
Consider.
workers that we
Yes.
export to
Yes.
the surrounding communities. would-
and I just wanted to reiterate that that was a brilliant idea, because when this property came up for negotiation, that was a huge selling point on that.
it was for me.
Exactly, so, and I think that that's something definitely that Bandera would really.
Open on the
benefit
weekend.
Patricia?
Well,
I was
exactly.
gonna say, depending on how big of an operation, a healthcare operation, that sounds silly, redundant, they would need, and what their total
Right.
vision is,
Mhm.
that is compatible with
Right.
still having property available for the mixed use. You know, we keep talking about affordable housing, there's no affordable housing for teachers even.
No, there isn't.
Well, and like you were talking about the jobs,
Yeah.
because the job pay rates will go up there too, I mean, cause they're gonna make a lot more than all of our service industries here too, so that would also bring more people in, I think, and keep more of our kids here.
Well, and there'll also be, like the lab techs, the MAs,
Right.
the, which are things.
Just a thought from the public.
The old
If y'all-
veteran.
if y'all are interested.
The old veteran welcome room when they come in. Hi,
You go to the VA.
hi.
Is this clinic,
No, I stay away from the VA.
how much are they gonna be open? Is this gonna be like a full-time, fully staffed, 7 days a
Can you
week?
line something
gonna
up with
interview.
them and try and see
I
if they
will
are
try.
willing to come
Yes,
talk to us
That would be
and see
fantastic.
what their needs are?
yes,
So that we know if this property even fulfills
Yes.
their needs?
that
Love
was
it.
gonna
And
be,
what other types of things that we can do as an EDC to help facilitate them with what they're bringing in?
okay.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Okay, the parcel that's on the far left of your map. That is what has been, that is the parcel that Silver Sage wants to purchase. The board already gave me permission to enter into negotiations with Silver Sage. I've gone through the first round of negotiations, and then the board stopped and hesitated.
What's the price?
So,
What's the price?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, and honestly, off the top of my head.
It was 65. Is it still 65? Or is it
Okay,
up?
yeah, so whatever they came to us with the proposal with is what the negotiation's at. We can't take any action on that tonight, but
Right.
I'm dead set on selling that Silver Sage because we need a food bank. If you go out to Mansfield Park once a month and see the food distribution that's done out there, food bank is grossly needed. The amount of office space that opens up for Silver Sage is grossly needed. That also fills so many other roles just with Silver Sage. Silver Sage is our one Red Cross disaster shelter that's designated in the area.
The MHMR services they provide
The MH,
is being done in the
Yeah.
foyer.
so that is,
HMR? What's HMR?
Mental health,
Oh, right. In the building there.
so it's being done in the foyer right now. This building, if they do the food distribution, there would be a dedicated office for that. My understanding that they also do the sexual assault crisis stuff there.
Yeah, it's her
working.
expanding.
The amount of stuff other than just senior citizens that Silver Sage does for this community is huge, and this gives them not just a food bank, but also added office space for everything that they do within the community. And when you look at the communities just getting older and older, unless we find a way to bring that median age down. Don't mean to make old jokes, but,
Huh?
And they employ people as well.
That's true.
and they employ
I didn't
people.
hear what you said, I got my mask on.
And the expansion of this would give them the ability to employ more people because they wouldn't be working in the foyer.
And
Uh,
there's a social, we've just gotten a grant for a social service type person that will service the county.
So, yeah,
Well, I would
So-
like the offices there, but not the food bank. I say let's put the food bank over by where the Silver Sage thrift shop is.
We can't,
Why not?
because that is a rental property.
Why can't you rent a property? I don't think that's an appropriate location.
There's already
For
a food
bringing that much
bank
traffic
going
in
on
there. For
inside
bringing
of
that
the
much
Silver Sage.
traffic in
you've
there.
already got that much traffic over there.
There's already,
That's right.
the food
Back up
bank's already
against-
operating out of Silver Sage.
Yeah, I know.
And I know
And
you're
they're- and they're
And
concerned,
I could keep it on that side of the street.
well, you could keep the parking and everything
Yeah,
on the
he could put the
Mulberry
parking
side.
across the street and then put the food bank on that side.
That could happen.
That could happen. I'll go with that, but I'm not putting it there. I'm not
That
putting
could
it there.
happen.
Alright.
I'll put the offices there.
Anybody else have,
He said there was gonna be a loading dock there.
Well, that
Oh,
loading
yeah,
dock
'cause
could be
the
on
trucks-
Mulberry,
It's up, no.
on Mulberry.
Where's Mulberry?
That's when you're coming across the bridge and going straight up the hill.
Bandera Boulevard?
It's technically Bandera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bandera Boulevard, right here. Oh, Whitetail. Yeah, I don't want that there. No, not the food bank.
Because all that's across from that is that property that's empty, then it belongs to that one house up there.
Doesn't matter. It backs up right to that house right there that just sold for $400,000. It's got a pool in the backyard.
But when they built that house, they knew that was commercial property.
Well, I've heard that argument before, but I don't think they deserve to be punished. I'm not punishing single-family homeowners
How is
to
that,
accommodate the
how is
food
that?
bank.
I would like to ask a question to our local realtor.
We got two.
Oh, heck, even better. Does that hurt the property value at all, having a food bank versus an open lot right next to a single family?
With the loading dock, with a lot of public energy coming and
Well,
going.
the public energy's already there, just right on the other side of the street. Because again, the food bank is
Yeah,
right on
okay,
the other
let's
side
put it
of
on
the
the other
street.
side of the street.
So if on that property you put a food bank with a parking lot, with a loading dock,
It's obvious, it's always gonna be more appealing for a buyer to not have a loading dock versus an open field.
okay.
But what if it was
But-
facing the other,
But it's
Okay.
commercial property,
right?
so,
Right, he put,
Whenever-
he put everything in one little
Okay,
area.
let
Sorry,
people talk, please.
you're right, I'm sorry, boss.
No,
so I would say that when they bought the house, it was commercial, and that's definitely always a risk. You know, anytime you buy it next to an empty lot, it could be developed into something else. They could put a gas station there too, so. And, I mean, anyone who sells, if you sell it to somebody else, they could turn around and sell it, and they could do whatever, you know, potentially.
Right, the
Unless you
Boyles
guys-
could turn around and sell it to them.
They absolutely could.
Yes, they could.
Okay. Alright, so we'll go back to the original with the other three plots. Do we wanna sell it? Do we wanna hold it? Do we wanna?
Well, we gotta do the interviews first, don't we? Are you gonna talk to the medical, or are you gonna talk to the medical people and see if there is an
Well,
interest?
this one was separate from that one, from the
Oh,
other
I'm sorry.
three.
Say it again, I didn't understand.
This one lot we were looking at separately from the other three.
The one at this one.
No.
You're talking about this one
That
still?
one, yes.
Oh, I thought we were done.
You were hoping.
Thank you.
We're done with these three. We've been
You
done
wanna
with
keep
these three.
talking about that.
I like the idea of having the mixed use property there, the multifamily, the family and the commercial both together, integrated. I think that's a really good idea, and I think it's a great use for that area.
Yes.
But I think it should be sold at the right price, or there should be definite, what are the things called?
Impact.
Impacts, or definite expectations as far as what the housing cost should be, or what, you know, what you'd expect to be there. But I think that's a good use for it.
I think we should sell, and I think we should vote at the next meeting to give everyone an answer, yes or no. That's my.
I
personal-
agree
That's
with that.
fair.
I
More
don't
than
know that
fair.
I can have
Thank
information
you.
that
I
quick.
think that way,
But I'll try.
everyone has some time to do what they need to do, and then we can just at least know with the ones on the table, yes or no. If we're not convinced on those, then we know it's a no, you know? So I think that's basic. I feel like we're all in agreement that we need to move these properties. They're valuable, they're really gonna impact Bandera, so let's make that a priority and let's do it.
We're at like
Yeah.
7-8 months now
Yeah, it's
that
crazy.
these proposals have been in, we haven't even given them the courtesy of
Yeah.
a no.
I feel like we've been
We need to move
incredibly rude, because how can they make plans, you know, any of them? I wouldn't come to the board and try and work with us, because I think it would be too big of a hassle. So I just wanna be considerate of others. Okay. Everyone good?
Count the week.
That sounds great.
Are y'all okay with
Yeah,
the price,
Lauren.
with the fees, that-
With the what?
with the prices that have been offered?
We
I guess
can't,
That-
so
that'll be
that, we
discussion
can't
in the
even.
I know, but that's a question you need to be asking yourself.
Yeah, that's the question to ask, is the last negotiation, you can look back on minutes from the previous ones.
They're burned in my head.
Everyone get your numbers right. I think that's very smart. Everyone should know.
Alright.
I think it's
So-
a good idea.
Can I get a motion for item number 6?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
A second.
Alright, motion second, all in favor? All in favor, none opposed, thank you.